Chapter 346. In a flash, Qin Wanru only felt that the white shadow in front of her was a little familiar. Seeing the white shadow rushing over, she hurriedly reached out to hold it. A soft meow sounded in her ear. Looking carefully, she found it was the white cat that Chu Luchin used to hold. At this time, it nestled in Qin Wanru's arms. It was also docile and gently meowed twice. The two girls on the ground were dumbfounded. For a moment, they didn't know whether to scream or not and blushed with shame. Seeing that their miss made a fool of herself, the two servant girls hurriedly put all the medicinal materials in Yujia's hands and came over to help them up. Before they could say anything, they saw several eunuchs rushing out of the door of the moon cave in front of them. The first one was Xiao Xuanzi. When he saw the two frightened misses, he immediately shouted, "Come on, drive them out." They scared His Highness's favorite cat and dared to throw it out. If it is damaged, who can afford to pay for it? His Highness's favorite cat. The two were dumbfounded. No one expected that this cat had such a powerful background. Drive them out quickly. Do you want His Highness to come here in person? Xiao Xuanzi looked angry and screamed. The two guards immediately came over and pulled out the swords in their hands with a fierce look. Seeing this, Xiao Jia, and the miss didn't dare to say anything. At this time, they didn't care about etiquette, turned around and ran out crying. If they didn't leave, they didn't know what Prince Chen would do. They had heard that Prince Chen was gentle on the surface but cruel and merciless in fact. He didn't want to kill himself for a cat. Thinking of some rumors about Prince Chen, the two of them shivered with pale faces and almost fell several times. Seeing this situation, the palace maid who led the way had to chase after them. These two misses were also the concubines chosen by the Empress Dowager for Prince Chen. Now it seemed that they not only had no boudoir manners but also lacked etiquette. Needless to say, these two would definitely be kicked out of the list of candidates by the Empress Dowager. Seeing the two run away crying, Xiao Xuanzi waved his hand. Several little eunuchs left, and the two guards also retreated to the gate of the palace. "Second miss, please. I'm waiting for your medicinal materials." Xiao Xuanzi nodded and bowed with a smile, which was completely different from his arrogant look just now. Qin Wanru nodded with the white cat in her arms and followed Xiao Xuanzi inside. Along the way, he discovered that this palace was actually very large, not much smaller than the Empress Dowager's palace of Compassionate and Peaceful. With such a large scale, it should be much larger than most of the palaces in the palace, right? This is the palace where my master has lived since he was a child. Later, when my master grew up, he asked to move out. The Empress Dowager and the Emperor didn't agree at first. They originally wanted my master to stay in the palace, even if it was more convenient for him to take care of his body. However, my master felt that living in the palace was too noisy and insisted on moving out. Helpless, the Empress Dowager and the Emperor agreed. Xiao Xuanzi explained with a smile. "How old was your master at that time?" Qin Wanru asked casually. "I was only 8 years old at that time," Xiao Xuanzi said with a smile, and then sighed. "My master's body was very poor at that time, and he was particularly prone to illness. I was very worried. There were 4 imperial physicians on duty living in the mansion all the time, and they were all afraid that something would happen to my master. At that time, my master was small and weak, and looked younger than others." The smile on Xiao Xuanzi's face had long disappeared. Thinking of those days, his eyes turned red. A child without parents, even if the emperor expressed that he was very good to him, he would not be so attentive. The sick and weak child sat in a wheelchair alone, drinking bitter medicine every day. Inexplicably, Qin Wanru felt more pity in her heart. At that time, Chu Luchin should be about the same age as Hao was now 7 years old, and Chu Luchin was 8 years old. He might be younger than Hao But even so, he had to leave the palace and live alone. He would rather have no so-called relatives to take care of him. Qin Wanru was silent for a while, and no longer asked other things. She just held the cat in her hands and gently touched it. Chu Luchen was in the corridor behind the inner hall. This place had a great advantage. He could bask in the sun, but he could not be blown by the wind. There was a veil outside the corridor to block the wind, and there were several heaters. As soon as he came in, he immediately felt warm as spring. Chu Luchen wore a snow-white robe, and his black hair was casually hanging down. He did not tie a belt around his waist. He looked very relaxed, and even had a feeling that his sleeves were fluttering. He held a pen in his hand and was actually painting. Hearing the sound of the door behind him, he did not turn his head. Xiao Xuanzi shouted, "Master!" Chu Luchen ignored him and continued to paint. Xiao Xuanzi wanted to shout again, but Qin Wanru waved her hand to signal him to stop. She stepped forward and stood behind Chu Luchen. When she saw everything on the painting clearly, she was stunned and stared at the painting in front of her. Wasn't this what happened at the gate of the palace just now? She raised her eyes to look outside the corridor, and found that this corridor was a corner. From the diagonal opposite side, she could see the outside of the palace gate. Although it was a little far away, she should have seen the scene just now. Although there were only a few strokes in the painting, it could be seen that he was lowering his head and hugging the cat to comfort it. On the ground, one was kicking its legs and screaming, and the other was crying. No matter how you looked at it, it looked very lifelike. How is it? Is it very vivid? Chu Luchen suddenly asked without raising his head, and the pen in his hand did not stop. Your Highness's painting is very unique. Qin Wanru looked at his skilled style and said helplessly. Such an experienced and skilled way of painting was actually just to paint the ugly state of other women. It really made people speechless. As a son of an aristocratic family, shouldn't he pretend that he did not see it? Ordinary sons of aristocratic families all asked for this, not to mention Chu Luchen, who was Prince Chen. Of course it is unique. When I finish painting, I will show it to Grandma later. Chu Luchen raised his handsome lips and smiled very leisurely. Empress Dowager will not like it. Qin Wanru paused and had to remind him. Of course, she could understand the meaning of Empress Dowager. It was obvious that there were a few more people. If Chu Luchen presented this painting to Empress Dowager, he might be reprimanded by Empress Dowager. In Qin Wanru's view, it had nothing to do with her whether there were a few more people or not. It was originally a plan of expediency. Because of this, she would not care about the gain or loss of status. Chu Luchen put down the painting in his hand and shook his robe in a natural and unrestrained manner. He squinted at Qin Wanru and suddenly smiled gently. He sat on the chair on the side and said, "As long as I like it." Xiao Xuanzi came over and asked Qin Wanru to sit on the other side. Another little eunuch came up to serve tea and then left quietly. "Prince, Empress Dowager will blame me," Qin Wanru said very helplessly. "So what? Aren't you originally here to protect me from disasters?" Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows and a gentle smile appeared in his handsome eyes. His expression was extremely innocent and deceptive. Qin Wanru was extremely speechless and even had an impulse to roll her eyes. "Prince, thank you for sending people to me." She suddenly felt that it was better to change the topic. "Don't feel grateful. If you really feel sorry, find a way to enter Prince Chen's mansion to accompany me as soon as possible, so that Imperial Grandmother will not send people to me every 2 or 3 days. Chu Luchen said in a lazy voice. It meant that today's thing was not the first time, and certainly not the last time. And she was sent here coincidentally. Qin Wanru bit her lips and felt that the deep gratitude in her heart faded a little. Thinking that if she really entered Prince Chen's mansion, she might not have a good life. She felt inexplicably depressed. Fortunately, this emotion just passed. If she regarded herself as Chu Liuchen's subordinate and this was a task, it would not be so difficult to accept. "Prince, how do you know about Xiao Huai?" Regarding this, Qin Wanru was still full of doubts. How did Chu Luchen know about this when she had missed this thing? "Your Fenghua glazed lamp, I recognize it." Chu Luchen said, leaning back and reaching out to touch his chin. He looked at Qin Wanru with his handsome eyes and said meaningfully, Qin Wanru, you owe me a big favor again. This favor was indeed a big one. It could be said that he sent the most suitable witness when Qin Wanru needed it most. Qin Wanru stood up and bowed helplessly, Prince, thank you for your kindness. Whatever you want me to do, I will not hesitate to break into pieces. Break into pieces? There is no need. I need someone who can make Imperial Grandmother less annoyed. You can come to see me when you are free. I will live in the palace to recuperate during this time. Chu Luchen said leisurely. How can I enter the palace? Qin Wanru looked surprised. This was the palace. Even ordinary aristocratic families could not enter casually. Here is an waste token. You can take it. When you enter the palace, you can visit Imperial Grandmother first and then come to see me. Imperial Grandmother will not say anything. Chu Luchen reached out to take a token from the desk and handed it to Qin Wanru. This is not very good, right? Qin Wanru did not dare to reach out to take it. What are you afraid of? I have sent out several tokens like this. Chu Luchen said indifferently. His eyes fell on Qin Wanru. Suddenly, he moved his head forward and almost touched Qin Wanru's face. On that handsome face, his eyes were shimmering with love. Qin Wanru was scared and hurriedly stepped back. What are you afraid of? Are you afraid that you will fall in love with me and not want to leave me in the future? Qin Wanru bit her red lips and said, Prince, you must be joking. How dare I? She had never thought that she was just a shield for Chu Luchen. She knew this very clearly. In this life, this was what she should repay to Chu Luchen. It was a return of kindness and a deal. Qin Wanru did not intend to have any personal feelings in it. What's more, she couldn't afford to have such a monstrous prince. He wasn't as harmless and gentle as the one in front of her. The image of a handsome young man who walked out of a landscape painting must be a facade. In the future, he would inherit the throne and trample all the other heirs under his feet. Qin Wanru thought it was good to be a powerful subordinate. Even if she did not get married in the future, she could have a good life with Chu Luchen as her backer. Chapter 347. What painting? Qin Wanru was stunned and asked in astonishment. Not only send a painting, but also exchange one for me. Chu Luchen's voice became more and more lazy, but there was a hidden majesty that made people's hearts palpitate. Qin Wanru blinked her watery eyes and asked with many doubts, Prince, who do you want to exchange with? Chu Luyue. Chu Luchen said casually, and then his slender fingers gently flicked on the table. Xiao Xuanzi immediately understood and went into the room to take out a circle of paintings and put them in front of Chu Luchen. Chu Luchen pushed the painting in front of Qin Wanru, looked at her with a faint smile and said, What do you think? Prince, what do you want to exchange with Prince Yu? Qin Wanru knew that she couldn't refuse, so she asked helplessly. Naturally, I want to exchange the most precious painting in his hand. Chu Luchen's smile became deeper, but this kind of smile didn't look like a real joy in Qin Wanru's eyes. His handsome eyes were almost bottomless. That's all? Qin Wanru raised her willowy eyebrows and asked. Yes, as long as you say this, he must understand. Chu Luchen didn't mean to explain for her at all, but slightly narrowed his eyes, and his long eyelashes cast uneven shadows on his handsome eyes, which made his face look paler. There was a kind of weakness in his face. Where should I go to find Prince Yu? Qin Wanru said helplessly. She knew that she couldn't refuse this, and she couldn't refuse it. A good subordinate should be like this. When you go out later, he will naturally come. He is seriously injured and has been living in the palace recently. My cousins are all sick and weak people, so don't make him angry later. Chu Luchen said with a smile in a happy mood. Qin Wanru's mood was not happy at all. She even thought about what she should do if Chu Luyue got angry later. She bit her lips and felt very helpless. I think Chu Luiyue will be very angry later. Chu Luchen seemed to see the uneasiness in her heart, and even jokingly corrected himself, Qin Wanru, do you know that Chu Luiyue is very cruel? Qin Wanru was shocked. Her forehead was sweating, and her fingers twitched unconsciously. In her last life, she died under Qin Liuyue's order. When she was cut in half at the waist, but she did not die completely, the whole world seemed to be dyed red by blood, and she could almost see her twisted figure. The sharp and bloody pain seemed to be right beside her. She restrained herself from screaming with her greatest willpower. The cat in her arms suddenly made an extremely painful, meow, sound and stretched out its long and sharp claws to grab Qin Wanru's hand. Chu Liuchen's face darkened. He stretched out his hand and slapped hard on the cat's paw. He looked into the cat's eyes with hostility. The white cat meowed softly and flatteringly, and its paw gently fell down. Then it pitifully moved its chubby body and meowed twice at Chu Luchen. Meow, meow, Chu Liuchen's face darkened. It looked both aggrieved and pitiful. Awakened by the twisting body of the cat in her arms, Qin Wanru's bloodshot eyes slowly receded. She reached out to touch the cat's head, and her white and tender little hand was no longer stiff. Child, do you still need to say anything to Prince Yu? She took a deep breath, and when she raised her head again, her eyes were calm, as if the person who was panicking and terrified just now was not her. She was still the second miss of Qin's manor, and not the wronged soul who was screaming under the pill tower and soaked in blood. After her rebirth, everything would be paid with blood. You don't need to say anything. Just say that you must give me his favorite and most precious painting. Chu Luchen reached out and pushed the painting in front of Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru nodded and took the painting without any hesitation this time. She stood up and said, Child, wait for my news here. I will be back soon. Since Chu Luiyue was waiting for her outside, she would go out and meet him. Go early and come back early. Don't stay too long. There is nothing to say to him. Chu Luchen nodded with great satisfaction and smiled. Then he squinted at Qin Wanru and said meaningfully, Don't be too close to him. He is not a good person. At first glance, you can know he is black-hearted. Qin Wanru helplessly bowed and turned to go out. Xiao Xuanzi still led the way in front of her and sent her to the palace gate. Qin Wanru nodded to Xiao Xuanzi and then turned to leave with a painting in her arms. When she came here before, Yujie had memorized the way. At this time, she walked according to her memory. After walking around a bend, she saw a tall and straight figure with his hands behind his back under a tree in front of her. He was dressed in a navy blue robe, and two little eunuchs were standing not far away from him. She really guessed it. Qin Wanru stopped and looked at Chu Luiyue who was carrying her on his back. Her pair of clear and beautiful eyes were calm. She was not as excited as when she saw Chu Luiyue for the first time. At that time, she even couldn't control herself and poured water on Chu Luiyue. Thinking about it now, it seemed to be a lifetime ago. Chu Luiyue turned his face and looked at Qin Wanru. He looked her up and down and a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. Did Chu Luchen really think highly of her? Why did he get the news that Chu Luchen treated second Miss Qin differently from others, such as what happened at the palace gate and what happened today? It was not a secret in the palace that Imperial Grandmother wanted to choose a good marriage for Chu Luchen. However, no one could think of such a marriage. Chu Luiyue thought that according to his estimation, none of the three people who came today could meet the standard of Imperial Grandmother for Chu Liuchen's concubine selection. It was more like a concubine or a concubine. Recently, Imperial Grandmother invited several young madams to the palace from time to time in the name of sending medicine to Chu Luchen. However, when they arrived at Chu Liuchen's place, there was usually only one young madam left, and she would not stay for a long time. Just like Qin Wanru in front of him, she was driven out in such a short time. According to such a time, Chu Luchen did not seem to have a special affection for her. How to explain what happened at the palace gate? Could it be that Chu Luchen really directed and acted himself and deliberately made such a thing? Was he not afraid of really getting himself into trouble? Chu Luiyue felt that this statement was not credible. It was really that Chu Luchen could not protect himself. Not to mention saving people, even if he walked by himself, he could not guarantee when he would get sick again. If these two were not possible, it must be designed by someone else. Chu Luchen really did it just because he knew Qin Wanru. His eyes fell on Qin Wanru's delicate face, and he seemed to be thinking about something. Chu Luiyue was not Chu Luchen, who had been educated palace maids for a long time. He also had some unknown concubines in his mansion. After his legal wife married into his mansion, if there was anyone he liked, he would directly promote them. Because of his outstanding appearance and the prince who was most likely to inherit the throne in the future, he dared not to attract charming and shy eyes wherever he went. Even many young madams deliberately appeared on his way in order to meet him. He had seen all kinds of women, but it was the first time that he saw such calm and indifferent eyes like Qin Wanru's. That pair of misty watery eyes was very beautiful, almost able to reflect himself. But even so, there was only a faint coldness in them. Yes, a coldness. Even though the two of them were not far away, they seemed to be separated by thousands of mountains and tens of thousands of rivers, or in other words, separated by thousands of layers of fog. There was no flattery or shyness. There was a natural blush on her pink little face, but it was not the kind of blush that a young girl blushed when she saw a man she liked for the first time. The eyes of her beautiful eyes were almost calm. Such a woman was so young. Even when they met for the first time, she was so young that Chu Luiyue could almost ignore her gender. She was just a child. But now, he had to admit that she was a beautiful young madam, extremely weak and indifferent. Moreover, she did not have any wishful thinking about him and looked unapproachable. This feeling was so strange that he even wanted to see clearly whether this woman was playing hard to get. In the capital city, there were many young madams from aristocratic families. They pretended to be noble, but in fact, they were just fishing for men. Was the woman in front of him one of them? It should not be. She was too young to understand. Chu Luiyue shook his head secretly. She looked a little childish. Even if she had a natural charm, it was suppressed behind a layer of indifference. Seeing that she stopped politely and did not mean to approach him, she bowed sideways and said, "Your Highness, I pay my respects to you. Come back from third brother's place." Chu Luiyue walked over with his hands clasped behind his back and asked. "Yes." Qin Wanru took a step back calmly and kept a distance from him. "How is third brother's health? Can he get up?" Chu Luiyue's face was a little cold in the gorgeous brocade robe, which was the same as his usual expression. "Prince Chen, you can get up. He is painting. When he saw me coming, he specially asked me to bring a scroll of painting to you. He said that he would like to ask you to exchange your most precious and favorite scroll of painting." Qin Wanru presented the scroll of painting tied with a ribbon with both hands and said respectfully. "What?" Chu Luiyue's heart thumped. He had a bad intuition. How did Chu Luiyue know that he was here? Was Qin Wanru really his bait? "This is what Prince Chen asked me to bring to you." Qin Wanru handed the painting in her hand forward. Chu Luiyue heard it clearly this time. Chu Luiyue heard it clearly this time. He took the painting with an ugly face, pulled open the ribbon wrapped around the painting, and opened it. When he saw the painting on it clearly, he was so angry that he sneered and said, "It turns out that he likes her. Unfortunately, I don't have a painting that matches this one. Tell my third brother not to test me. I have nothing to do with Miss Xiao. If he likes her, he can come to propose marriage to her." After saying that, he threw the painting coldly, swung his robe, turned around and strode away. The painting was thrown on the ground. Qin Wanru looked at the painting. From her angle, she could not see the person, but only half of the beautiful and elegant face of a woman. It was very familiar. Qin Wanru looked at the face, took 2 steps forward, squatted down, and spread the painting flat. When she saw the person on it clearly, her cold eyes were full of malice. Chapter 348. It was Xiao Yenru in the picture. At the first sight, Qin Wanru had already confirmed her identity. Even if she turned into mud, she would still recognize this person. High and mighty, was there a huge difference between them? With a gloomy and cold look in his eyes, he remembered that he had been set up by her in the last life. He slowly reached out to pick up the painting. Xiao Yenru, in a light green dress, stood at the door of a moon cave and looked up slightly at the plum blossom on the tree. She looked elegant and beautiful in the wind. No wonder there were rumors in the capital city that Xiao Yenru was the first beauty in the capital city. They all said that she was beautiful, talented, and proficient in zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Besides, she came from a noble family, was dignified and decent, and had a sense of propriety. She could be said to be the model of women in the capital city. Perfect. She had perfectly deceived everyone. If it were not for her personal experience in the last life, Qin Wanru would definitely think that she was such a person. Qin Wanru's watery eyes slid across the delicate face, and then her eyes fell on the corner of the painting. Of course, she would not think that Chu Luchen really liked Xiao Yenru. She could even be sure that even if Xiao Yenru could be deceived, she could not deceive Chu Luchen. She could even be sure that even if Xiao Yenru could deceive everyone in the world, she could not deceive Chu Luchen. So what was the purpose of sending this painting? Did he want to provoke Chu Luyue? Was there an ambiguous relationship between Chu Luyue and Xiao Yenru? Then why did Xiao Yenru not marry Chu Luyue in the last life, but become in the palace of the current emperor? With her identity, it was reasonable for her to become Chu Luyue's legal wife. There should be some inside story, and this inside story made Xiao Yenru and Chu Luyue not appear to be together on the surface. But in fact, Qin Wanru still clearly remembered the scene before her death. There must be something between them. There was a vigorous signature in the corner of the painting. Seeing this signature, Qin Wanru felt like being struck by lightning. She put the painting in front of her eyes and looked at it carefully. When she saw it clearly, she burst into tears. Layman from the Drizzle Pavilion wrote vigorously, and his words penetrated the back of the paper. His eyes, which were so calm that there was almost no ripple, suddenly moved. She bit her lips and swallowed the excitement in her heart. How could she not be excited? In her memory, there was a lay Buddhist of Weiyu Pavilion, but she never knew who this person was. However, when she entered the palace as a painter, he used a painting scroll to guide her painting. Was it this person? She didn't know if it was because he wasn't in her memory, or if she really hadn't seen him before. Her slender fingers trembled slightly. "Miss, what's wrong with you?" Yujia also squatted down. Looking at Qin Wanru's excited face, she could not help but ask in surprise. "Go." Qin Wanru stood up, turned around and walked back. She wanted to ask Chu Luchen who this lay Buddhist of Weiyu Pavilion was and who this mysterious person who had been kind to her in the last life was. When Qin Wanru returned to Chu Liuchen's palace, the two guards at the gate of the palace gave way to her and didn't come up to question her like before. Qin Wanru hurried in and stayed in the middle hall. She turned around the inner hall to the back corridor and saw Chu Luchen, who was lounging on the couch. He leaned lazily on the couch, holding a book casually in his hand. Noticing that Qin Wanru came in, he raised his shimmering eyes to look at Qin Wanru, and his expression returned to the former gentleness. "You didn't change it?" Chu Luchen put down the book in his hand with interest, looked at the painting scroll in Qin Wanru's hand and asked. "Child, who is the lay Buddhist of Weiyu Pavilion?" Qin Wanru walked a little hurriedly and gasped twice. "He is just an ordinary painter." "Why, do you also want him to paint for you?" Chu Luchen said casually. "Where is he?" Qin Wanru asked eagerly. "He left. He is not one of my people. I just met him by chance." Chu Luchen became more and more relaxed. He leaned on the cushion, and there was a hint of laziness in his whole body. It was quite similar to his cat. Left? Sure enough, he was very mysterious and couldn't be seen again. Qin Wanru gently bit her lips and suppressed the rolling thoughts in her heart. She handed over the painting scroll in her hand and said, "Child, Prince Yu doesn't want to change it. He said that you don't need to test him. If you like, you can propose marriage by yourself." "Propose marriage?" Chu Luchen laughed as if he had heard something very funny. "Prince, you don't want to?" Qin Wanru asked. "Do you want me to marry this first Miss Xiao?" Chu Luchen narrowed his eyes and stopped smiling. If others asked this, Qin Wanru would think that he had some ideas about her. But if Chu Luchen asked, Qin Wanru didn't doubt it at all. Chu Luchen should know the resentment between her and Duke Xing's mansion. If she confronted Madame of Duke Xing, she would confront this famous first Miss Xiao. In this case, Qin Wanru certainly didn't want Chu Luchen to marry Xiao Yenru. "I don't want to." Qin Wanru said this without any hesitation or shyness. She sat down on a chair on one side and looked at Chu Luchen with her watery eyes. "Child, you should know that I don't like Xiao Yenru." "I know, but so what? Xiao Yenru's identity is really extraordinary. She is the eldest daughter of Duke Xing's lineal descent." Chu Luchen reached out his fingers to knock on the table and said meaningfully. Such an identity was enough for several princes to fight for. With such a powerful support, it was very beneficial for the princes who wanted to fight for the throne. "Child, do you need the background of Duke Xing's mansion?" Qin Wanru asked calmly. Her words were very calm, and they were also very sharp. "Yes." Chu Luchen smiled and his eyes were shining. It could be seen that he was in a very good mood. "If you need it, I will give you the background of Duke Xing's mansion." Qin Wanru said decisively and clenched her hands hard to maintain her calmness on the surface. She said this without any hesitation, and there was no hesitation. She couldn't let Xiao Yenru marry Chu Luchen. Otherwise, not only her, but also the people she wanted to protect would die without a burial place. Chu Luchen looked at her and suddenly smiled meaningfully. He reached out and waved to her. Qin Wanru stood up and walked slowly to Chu Luchen's bed. The white cat was lying lazily in front of the bed and snoring. Hearing a sound, it slightly opened its blue eyes and looked at Qin Wanru. It consciously got up, arched its body and jumped into Qin Wanru's arms. It fell into Qin Wanru's arms, bent its tail, and continued to sleep, as if it was sleeping on Chu Luchen's bed. "How about taking care of it for me for a few days?" Chu Luchen raised his lips and looked at the couple with great satisfaction. "I don't know how to take care of it." Qin Wanru raised her hand. The cat was fat and quite heavy. When it jumped over just now, her hand became soft and she almost dropped the cat. But even so, the cat was still sleeping lazily and didn't feel that it was almost dropped. "You must take care of it for me. If you can't." Chu Luchen narrowed his eyes threateningly. "Child, I can't take care of your Tang Qianyan well either." Qin Wanru sighed helplessly. She was really helpless. She didn't know what was wrong with this man. Why did he let her take care of all the things he liked? "You will take care of this cat well," Chu Luchen said meaningfully. "Why?" Qin Wanru was puzzled. "It likes you." Chu Luchen squinted at the white cat and said meaningfully. "It likes you." Qin Wanru was dismissed with one sentence. When they stood outside the Empress Dowager's palace, Qin Wanru held the fat white cat and sighed deeply. She really didn't know why the white cat seemed to be attached to her. When it left just now, it didn't even look up at its original master. "Second Miss Qin, the Empress Dowager asks you to go in." A palace maid came out in a hurry and bowed to Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru nodded and walked inside slowly. When she arrived at the hall, she bowed to the Empress Dowager respectfully and said, "Greetings, Empress Dowager. Is this Chen Er's cat?" The Empress Dowager looked at the fat cat in surprise. "Yes, Empress Dowager. Prince Chen asks me to go back and take care of the cat." Qin Wanru actually wanted to put the cat down, but the cat was still sleeping there and didn't even open its eyes. "Let me see it." The Empress Dowager waved to Qin Wanru and said. Qin Wanru got up and walked to the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager reached out to pick up the cat from Qin Wanru's arms. Meow. The fat cat woke up and glanced at the Empress Dowager lazily without any sign of affection. It turned sideways and arched into Qin Wanru's arms, as if it didn't want to be intimate with the Empress Dowager. When the Empress Dowager saw the cat's human-like appearance, she also laughed. She waved her hand to let Qin Wanru sit down beside her and pointed at the cat. I don't know where this little guy got his temper. In the past, he was only close to Chen. Now he is even close to you. It seems that it is really fate. If the Empress Dowager was most dissatisfied with Qin Wanru before, it must be the thing that Xiao Jia came to the palace today. However, the Empress Dowager also found out that it was the fault of the first miss of Qin's mansion. She just scolded Xiao Jia for it, which scared Xiao Jia so much that she knelt down and begged for mercy, saying that she just heard it from others. The Empress Dowager asked someone to send her back directly. As for the other one, she stayed a little bit. After asking a few words, she knew that her grandson didn't like her, so she sent her away. Empress Dowager, I don't know how to raise a cat. Qin Wanru said helplessly. In fact, she had no clue until now. It's okay. This fat cat is very easy to raise, but it has a bad temper. When it is angry, it will scratch people. You should be careful. The Empress Dowager smiled gently. I may not be able to raise it well. Qin Wanru was very hesitant. It doesn't matter. If you can't raise it well, you can give it back to Chen. Does Chen have a plate for you? The Empress Dowager smiled slightly. There is a plate. Qin Wanru took out the plate from her arms and handed it up respectfully. The Empress Dowager glanced at it and knew it was that plate. She nodded secretly and said with a kind look, You take it first. When you are free, come to see me. If you don't know anything about raising a cat, you can also ask Chen. Yes, Empress Dowager. Qin Wanru bowed her head and said respectfully. Chapter 349. Prince, do you really want to go to Duke Xing's mansion to propose marriage? Xiao Xuanzi followed Chu Luchen and asked anxiously when he saw his master pick a few ornaments randomly. No. Chu Luchen walked a few steps with his hands behind his back. Then why do you want to pick this kind of ornaments for women? Xiao Xuanzi asked confusedly. This was a private warehouse of his master in the palace. All the ornaments in it were given by the nobles in the palace, and each of them was of amazing value. But his master never cared about it very much. He even didn't want to go out of the mansion. Some of them were directly thrown into the private warehouse of the palace, and he never came to see them in the past. Raise the fat cat for me, and I have to pay for your labor. Chu Luchen casually picked up a box and looked at it. It was a pair of blood jade bracelets. This is good, keep it. Hearing that it was for Qin Wanru, Xiao Xuanzi immediately became excited and took out some fine ornaments in the corner. These were deliberately put aside by Xiao Xuanzi, and he originally wanted to leave them for his female master. Before Chu Luchen said to give them to Qin Wanru, Xiao Xuanzi didn't intend to take them. Come out. After Chu Luchen picked a few more ornaments, he walked out of the private warehouse. Xiao Xuanzi hurriedly locked the door of the private warehouse, took a few ornaments, and followed him out. Prince, are you going to send someone to reward second miss? I have nothing to do, so I can go. Xiao Xuanzi volunteered. I have something to do. Chu Luchen said lightly. What's the matter, Prince? Xiao Xuanzi was stunned and asked anxiously. Of course I have something to do. Send 2 to Duke Xing's mansion, and ask them when the first miss of their mansion will come back for me. Chu Luchen said meaningfully. Prince, you don't want to marry the miss of Duke Xing's mansion, but you want to send her things. Do you want her to be a concubine? Xiao Xuanzi didn't understand what he meant. I don't want her to marry into the mansion. Chu Luchen said lightly, and his handsome lips curled up. He felt it was very interesting. The more Chu Luiyue wanted to hide it, the more he wanted to reveal it. Yes, then I will go to Duke Xing's mansion. Who will send the gifts to second miss? Xiao Xuanzi felt that he actually wanted to go to Ningyuan Army General's mansion. Is there no one else but you? Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows. No. I'm just afraid that you can't find the right person. Xiao Xuanzi said with a smile. Did Imperial Grandmother let them go? Chu Luchen suddenly stood still and looked in the direction of Empress Dowager's Palace of Benevolent Peace. It was said that they let her go. The Empress Dowager specially rewarded the second Miss Qin with a lot of things and asked several palace maids to send her out. Many people in the palace said that the second Miss Qin was so lucky to be favored by the Empress Dowager. Xiao Xuanzi reported the news he had heard to Chu Luchen. A smile appeared on Chu Liuchen's handsome face, and he coughed in a low voice, looking quite satisfied. It was indeed more appropriate for Imperial Grandmother to value him than him. Master, take a rest first. You have to take medicine later. Xiao Xuanzi hurriedly stepped forward and reached out to help him. Medicine? Chu Luchen stood still, calmed down and asked. Yes, it's a new medicine. Master, Dr. Qi said that if you treat me well, you will get better. But if you continue to be like this. Xiao Xuanzi wanted to persuade him, but he was afraid of saying something taboo. For a moment, he couldn't control his tone, and he was so anxious that his forehead was full of sweat. Others didn't know his master, but how could he not know that his master had a heart disease, and in fact, his heart disease was the heaviest. Dr. Qi said that if even his master didn't want to live, then even if the almighty immortal came to the world, he couldn't save his master. The only person who could save his master was himself. This was also one of the main reasons why Xiao Xuanzi especially liked Qin Wanru. He felt that when his master got along with second Miss Qin, he was most like a living person. All his emotions were at will. He didn't show an expression of need at different times and when he saw different people. He didn't show an expression of need as if his heart was dead. He didn't show the light and dead silence as if his heart was dead. Even the medicine was casually taken. If he wanted to take it, he would take it. If he didn't want to take it, he would refuse to take it. Is there a new medicine? Chu Luchen raised his eyes. Yes, it's a new medicine. Dr. Qi said that if you keep taking it obediently, you will be fine. Although I have been sick since I was a child, I have always practiced martial arts. It's good for your recovery. Xiao Xuanzi was afraid that Chu Luchen wouldn't listen to him, so he hurriedly promised him. While his master was in a good mood, he hurriedly said. Go and get the medicine. Chu Luchen said lightly. Ah. Xiao Xuanzi was stunned. He thought that he needed to say a long speech, and his master didn't know whether he would agree or not. The result came so easily that Xiao Xuanzi didn't believe that he would be so happy. Since this prince has decided to let that little lass follow me, I can't let that little lass be a widow, right? Chu Luchen said casually and lazily. His words didn't sound so real, and even he felt it was funny after he said it. He even wondered if it was possible. With his imperial grandmother's love for him, if something really happened to him, it was possible that she would force the little girl to be a widow. Even if they had nothing to do with each other now, if he couldn't get up at this time, when he was dying, his imperial grandmother would definitely let Qin's mansion agree to this marriage. It was unreasonable for his imperial grandmother to be overbearing. Therefore, this reason was very reasonable, and even he felt that he might believe it. Yes, that's the reason. Even if you don't think for yourself, you have to think for second Miss Qin. Xiao Xuanzi almost cried with joy. Of course, I don't want to die like this. Those people are still fine. Chu Luchen smiled and looked at the sky with his beautiful eyes, which were gloomy and dark. That place was not the Empress Dowager's Palace of Benevolent Peace. At this glance, Xiao Xuanzi was frightened. That place seemed to be the place where the emperor lived, right? When you go to Duke Xing's mansion to ask about Xiao Yanru, if someone asks me why I suddenly ask about her, just say that I saw her portrait in my brother's place and think she is very good. Chu Luchen restrained the smile at the bottom of his eyes and waved his hand very elegantly. Chu Luiyue thought that he did it secretly, so he would let everyone see it. The royal family didn't like two men fighting for a woman, especially the brothers of the royal family. He wanted to see how Chu Luiyue would cooperate with Duke Xian's mansion. Of course, since it was an alliance, he was not afraid. The backer of Duke Xian's mansion was not Chu Luiyue. Moreover, there was Chu Liuzhou. It was better to make trouble. Prince Qin sent someone to Duke Xing's mansion to send gifts, and he specially asked about the first Miss Xiao, who had always had a good reputation. Many aristocratic families got the news and guessed for a moment whether Prince Qin wanted to marry the first Miss Xiao. If it was true, everyone felt that it was a pity for the first Miss Xiao. Such a beautiful and talented miss was actually chosen by Prince Qin. How pitiful it was. Not to mention Prince Chen's embarrassing identity, his health would not last for a few years. Who would want to marry him? Even if she married him, she would not have a good life in the future. If she had no children, she would be alone for the rest of her life. No matter how rich she was, it was useless. If she had children, it would not be a good thing. No matter who inherited the throne in the future, he would be very afraid of his children. After all, fundamentally speaking, Chu Luchen was the orthodox of the royal family. No one knew when some old ministers of the former emperor would jump out and want to protect the throne. Then there would be another war. The best way was to kill all his children when they were young. Chu Luchen could live until now, not because the current emperor did not fear him, but because he thought that he would not live long anyway, so there was no need to care about a person who was going to die. It was better to show some doting gestures to show the world. This was also the reason why the emperor doted on Prince Qin very much. This kind of doting even exceeded that of his other three sons. Everyone could understand this, but this kind of doting only applied to Chu Luchen. If he really had children in the future, everyone would think it a tragedy. If the peerless first Miss Xiao had to marry into Prince Chen's mansion, it would be the tragedy of all tragedies. She was such a beautiful woman. Many people secretly sighed for Xiao Yanru. Of course, many misses were secretly happy. Wherever Xiao Yanru went, she was the center of attention of many misses. Many misses were also angry and jealous. Now hearing that Xiao Yanru might be in big trouble, how could they not be happy and secretly feel complacent? Then another piece of news came out, which made everyone think highly of the first Miss Xiao. It was said that the reason why Prince Chen, who rarely appeared in front of people, specially came to Duke Xing's mansion was that he saw the painting of the first Miss Xiao in Prince Yu's mansion. Did it mean that there was an ambiguous relationship between Prince Yu and the first Miss Xiao? Thinking of this, many people felt that the first Miss Xiao was amazing. She took a fancy to Prince Yu's potential and had a relationship with Prince Yu early. Thinking of this, everyone suddenly felt clear. Did Prince Chen mean that he wanted to compete with Prince Yu for the first Miss Xiao? It seemed to be right for everyone to think in this way, but they didn't know whether the first Miss Xiao and Prince Chen had a relationship long ago. When everyone was speculating in this way, they suddenly heard that the second Miss of Ningyuan Army General had won the favor of the Empress Dowager and allowed her to enter the palace to accompany her from time to time. It was also said that the white cat of Prince Chen especially liked the second Miss Qin and even went out of the palace with the second Miss Qin. For this reason, Prince Chen also prepared a gift and fostered the cat in Qin's mansion, which was a reward to the second Miss Qin. For a time, Qin Wanru was in the limelight. Many people in the capital city were inquiring about who she was. Later, when they heard that she was the younger sister who beat and scolded her younger sister in the street, they all shook their heads and sighed at this elder sister. This elder sister not only lost her reputation, but also seemed to lose favor with the nobles in the palace. In the future, would there be a future? Chapter 350. Old Madam, what should we do? The second Miss of the Qin's mansion is unwilling to take on this matter. Poor. First Miss, I'm afraid, she is the only daughter of my eldest uncle. As soon as Madame of Duke Xing entered old Madame's room, her eyes turned red and her voice choked. She covered her mouth with a handkerchief and almost cried. Old Madame's eyes also turned red, and she trembled her hands and said, What should we do? The second Miss of the Qin's mansion saved my life. Knowing that the second Miss of the Qin's mansion had saved her life, old Madame suddenly didn't know how to deal with it. At this time, she was discussing with Nanny Yu. Hearing Madame of Duke Xing's words, she only felt sad. Although she didn't like her eldest daughter-in-law, she liked her eldest son. Especially now that this son was gone, old Madame only felt sad and sad. Old Madame, Prince Qin sent someone to give Ru-er a gift just now. Does he like Ru-er? When he entered the palace today, he obviously liked the second Miss of the Qin's mansion. Could it be that the second Miss of the Qin's mansion said something? It's really sinful. Does the second Miss of the Qin's mansion not get along well with the princes in our mansion? Sitting beside old Madame, Madame of Duke Xing became more and more aggrieved. What, Ru-er? Old Madame was excited and immediately glared and asked. Ru-er was old Madame's beloved granddaughter, and no one in their mansion was optimistic about Prince Chen. This was the fate of their mansion to climb up the ladder in the future. How could they let others ruin the big thing? Yes, when Jia-er entered the palace before, she said that the Empress Dowager asked her, the second Miss of the Qin's mansion and a Miss of the Marquis's mansion of Fengyang to send medicine to Prince Chen. But as soon as they arrived at Prince Chen's mansion, they were driven away by Prince Chen, leaving only the second Miss of the Qin's mansion. After that, Jia-er was reprimanded by the Empress Dowager. But inexplicably, after the second Miss of the Qin's mansion left Prince Chen's mansion, Prince Chen came to our mansion. Madame of Duke Xing anxiously wiped a trace of tears from the corner of her eyes. Among the several princes' mansions, Duke Xing's mansion despised Prince Chen's mansion the most. Even though it was the Empress Dowager's decree, they only sent a daughter of a concubine to Prince Chen's mansion. Her purpose was to let Prince Chen choose a concubine and settle down his marriage. The Empress Dowager had long expressed that she would choose a consort for Prince Chen first. Everyone knew the reason why she did so. Prince Chen was in a precarious situation, and the Empress Dowager hoped that he would have a successor. At this time, no one dared to come forward. Only after choosing Prince Chen's wife could they come back to compete for other princesses. Duke Xing's mansion had agreed in this way at that time. There happened to be such an opportunity, so Xiao Yanru, the first Miss Xiao, left with the excuse of going to the Yuhui nunnery to learn painting. Does she really hate us because of that pair of bracelets? But I really don't know that she saved me. Old Madame said angrily. Compared with Qin Yuru, a specious granddaughter, of course, Xiao Yanru, her closest granddaughter, was more important. Even though Xiao Yanru had saved her life, Old Madame felt that she couldn't let it go. Old Madame, what should we do now? Did the second Miss of Qin's mansion say something to Prince Chen? Did she deliberately let Prince Chen make such a big trouble and let the Empress Dowager think that Prince Chen likes her? What should we do? The Empress Dowager has always been partial to Prince Chen. If. Madame of Duke Xing was really anxious. She picked up the teacup at hand and drank a few mouthfuls before she calmed down a little. Old Madam, we can't wait any longer. I will accept first Miss Qin as my adopted daughter and let her live in our mansion. Second Miss Qin also saved your life, so she can also come and live in our mansion. It can be regarded as our repayment for her saving our life. If I accept her as my adopted daughter, what about Rui and Great Elder Princess? Old Madam hesitated, not because of Qin Wanru's identity as her savior. It doesn't matter whether Rui and Great Elder Princess admits it or not. Anyway, we didn't say that she is my eldest uncle's daughter. There are too many things that happened in the past. If all the things are exposed, Old Madam may be verbally attacked by others again. It's better to let all these things pass. It's also because of my eldest uncle's spirit that we can find first Miss Qin. It's enough to treat her as a legitimate miss in our mansion. Other things are not important. Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion said softly. These words were completely according to Old Madam's intention. Speaking of the things that happened in the past, Old Madam disliked it very much. The things that happened in the past were a knot in Old Madam's heart. She thought that it was Infanta Qinghua who killed her son, so she didn't want to mention Infanta Qinghua. If it weren't for Infanta Qinghua's identity, she would not let her return to the mansion and give birth to Hao. The things that happened in the past were the things that Old Madam didn't like to talk about, the things that happened in the past. Madam of Duke Xing also understood Old Madam's mind. She had been raised by Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion since she was a child, so she knew Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion very well. She knew that Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion would definitely agree if she said so. As expected, Old Madam only thought for a little and made up her mind. Okay, then you will recognize her as your adopted daughter and treat her better in the past. All the people in our mansion should treat her as a legitimate Mississippi. In the future, when she marries into Duke Yong's mansion, she must also be given a generous dowry. Old Madam arranged. It seemed that she really liked Qin Yuru as her granddaughter and considered everything for her. But in fact, if Qin Yuru was really her biological granddaughter, it was actually improper for her not to recognize the ancestral family and return to the ancestral family. A good biological granddaughter became an adopted one. The gap in this was not a little bit. Okay, then as Old Madam said, let the second Miss of Qin's mansion also live with her sister. On the one hand, it can show that first Miss Qin is kind and values sisterhood. On the other hand, it can also talk with second Miss Qin so that she doesn't have to be hostile to our mansion. Madam of Duke Xing had achieved her goal. She calmly pushed the blame to Old Madam, nodded and agreed, as if everything just now was proposed by Old Madam, and she agreed to it all according to Old Madam's opinion. Nanny Yu, who was standing on the side, stole a glance at her and lowered her head quietly. This is also good. Let the second Miss of Qin's mansion also come here. Since she saved me, I will not treat her badly. At that time, I will add a generous dowry to her. Old Madam took it for granted and raised her eyes with a bit of pride, as if Qin Wanru saved her at that time for her dowry. Old Madam, then I will go to arrange it. This matter has to be discussed with first Miss Qin's adoptive mother, Madam D. But now I heard that she is too sick to get up. Madam of Duke Xing frowned with difficulty and said, if we wait for her to recover, I don't know when it will be. The longer it is delayed, the worse it will be. Send a doctor in our mansion to treat Madam D. If she gets better, we will talk about this matter. We should try to settle this matter after the 15th day of the first lunar month. As for sending gifts in the future, don't forget to send one to second Miss of their mansion, so that people will know that our Duke Xing's mansion is not ungrateful. Old Madam looked at Madam of Duke Xing with approval and said. It was definitely impossible before the Spring Festival. Tomorrow was the eve of the Spring Festival. Next, if there was anything, it had to be discussed before the 15th day of the first lunar month. Yes, Old Madam, then I will go to arrange it now and try to settle this matter as early as possible. After getting the order from Old Madam, Madam of Duke Xing stood up and turned to go out. Old Madam's voice came from behind, has the Buddha statue sent last time arrived? Madam of Duke Xing stopped and said with a smile, Old Madam, don't worry. It will be sent soon. The small Buddha hall has also been arranged. When the Buddha statue arrives in the mansion, Old Madam can directly worship Buddha in the small Buddha hall and don't need to go out. You are old, so it is more appropriate for you to stay in the mansion. Old Madam was very satisfied with her words. She turned the Buddha beads in her hand, closed her eyes, and said with a solemn face, you can go. I will read a scripture later to pray for your eldest uncle. Then I won't bother you. Madam of Duke Xing left. When she was outside the door, a trace of viciousness flashed in her eyes. She snorted coldly and turned to leave. Chu Liuchen's gifts were placed on the table. Looking at the pair of blood jade bracelets among so many gifts, Qin Wanru opened them helplessly and put one on her hand. It was a little big. In fact, it was really not very suitable. Did she have a fate with blood jade bracelets recently? It seemed that blood jade bracelets were sent everywhere. Needless to say, Chu Luchen must have known about the blood jade bracelets. Xiao Xuanzi, did Prince say anything? Qin Wanru asked. My master said that the blood jade bracelets are very beautiful and asked Miss to wear them more often. Xiao Xuanzi said with a smile in a very good mood. He just came from Duke Xing's mansion with gifts, but he didn't stay in Duke Xing's mansion for a long time. After putting down the gifts, he asked a few more things about first Miss Xiao and even mentioned Prince Yu, and then he left. Moreover, he asked this question standing at the door in front of a group of servants at the door and people watching outside. After seeing Duke Xing, he put down the gifts and left in a hurry. What if I fall? Qin Wanru moved her wrist. The blood-red bracelet on her jade-like wrist was actually very beautiful, especially the shape of 3 golden plum blossoms on the outside of the bracelet, which was very unique and beautiful. The gemstones were the stamens and the golden ornaments were the petals. Prince said it's okay. I can give it to you if I fall. There are many such things in my private warehouse. Xiao Xuanzi said very generously, as if he was talking about the most common ornaments. Thank your prince for me, but you don't have to give it to me in the future. It's too attractive. Qin Wanru turned the bracelet and said tactfully. Second miss, don't worry. Duke Xing's mansion is more high profile, and yours is the most common. Xiao Xuanzi smiled very proudly, standing at the door and saying that giving gifts was the most attractive. What's wrong? Are there more high-profile gifts? Xiao Xuanzi, tell me. Hearing the meaning in his words, Yujie immediately became interested and took 2 steps forward to ask. Xiao Xuanzi proudly told her what had happened just now, and now even Qin Wanru also laughed. She lifted the corners of her pink lips and looked thoughtful, but there was a faint sharpness in her eyes. Chu Liuchen's action helped her. Madam of Duke Xing must be very anxious, right? In fact, she had already started the fire, and Chu Liuchen's action added another fire. But it would depend on how big the fire was. Chapter 351. Second miss, I really saw Qing Shui in Madame D's yard touch that set of molds. A sturdy and honest old maid reported to Qin Wanru. It turned out to be the new old maid who worked in the kitchen. Those delicate pastries were made by her. Is it Qing Shui? Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows and was quite surprised. Yes, it's Qing Shui. I also feel very strange. In the past, when Qing Shui came to the kitchen to take things, she came and left immediately. But that time, she didn't leave after waiting for a long time. Later, I wanted to make some pastries for masters to taste. Qing Shui was beside me, so she pointed out where the molds were, and then helped me find the most beautiful set of molds. The old maid said in detail. Qing Shui used to be Qin Wanru's servant girl, but at that time she seldom went to the kitchen. Qin Wanru basically didn't send her to do anything, and she had always been in the yard. But since Qing Shui went to serve Madame D, she basically did many things. On the one hand, it was because she was not originally a servant of Madame D's yard, but was sent to serve Madame D later. She had no part in Madame D's crime. On the other hand, some people were lenient to her because she used to be Qin Wanru's servant girl. If Madame D had something necessary, she would discuss it with the old maid who guarded the door. Madame D's food was specially sent by the kitchen. But if Madame D really wanted to add another dish, Qing Shui could come out and tell the kitchen after discussing with the old maid who guarded the door, but it must be done quickly. Regarding this point, the people in the residence all turned a blind eye. Just like the 2 servant girls, Huang Rui and Hong Ye, who were sent by Duke Yong's mansion later, the mansion still allowed this little bit of borrowing at the right time. After all, Madame D was still the wife of Ningyu, an army general on the surface, but she was recuperating and lived in seclusion. Qin Wanru smiled and asked again, Qing Shui pointed you to get the molds? Yes, it was Qing Shui. If second miss doesn't believe it, you can directly ask Qing Shui. The old maid nodded and said very sincerely. Then you didn't see Qing Shui bring the molds in, did you? Qin Wanru picked up the tea at hand, took a sip, and slowly put it down. I really didn't see it. But if it wasn't Qing Shui, how could she be so familiar with this matter and find this set of molds so easily? The old maid shook her head. After saying that, she even muttered to herself, if I had known it, I would have asked her again. Yu Jia asked, you think Qing Shui is very suspicious? I think so, but I don't know if it's true. I just think, no one is so suspicious except for Qing Shui. The old maid nodded. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on this old maid, and a trace of coldness flashed in her watery eyes. This old maid seemed to be a very honest person. Only when she spoke occasionally did people feel that she was clever. But when she looked closely, she was just an honest old maid. Based on her behavior and statement, it seemed that she was surrendering to Qin Wanru. Even though Madame D was now locked up, no one dared to discredit her face to face. Therefore, even though this was a fact carefully investigated by this old maid, because this fact was related to Madame D, the old maid could not directly tell the old maid in charge, and could only come to Qin Wanru secretly. In any aspect, this old maid was extremely loyal, and of course, she was also very cautious. Any master would like a loyal and cautious old maid, not to mention that this old maid was in the kitchen and had a certain amount of information. The whole mansion's kitchen was a very important place, and there were many people. If one wanted to inquire about something, it was very easy to inquire about it in a place like the kitchen. Moreover, the old maid's pastries were very good. Even Yu Jie and Qing Yu had praised the sweet taste of the pastries without the molds. In summary, this old maid was extremely useful. Now she came to show her loyalty, indicating that she was partial to Shui Rulin and Qin Wanru. I heard that your ancestor used to run a pastry shop. How was it? Qin Wanru asked with a smile and changed the topic. It seemed that she was a little interested. Second miss, my family was good before. The old maid lowered her head and looked gloomy. What happened to your family? Qin Wanru asked. Nothing happened to my family. The old maid shook her head. It could be seen that she was really sad. She turned her head and wiped her face with her sleeve. When did it happen? Qin Wanru continued to ask calmly. A few months. Yu Jie, give her a pouch. If there is any news in the future, tell Yu Jie, Qing Yu, or Chu Lu. Qin Wanru said. Yu Jie took out a pouch from her sleeve and handed it to the old maid. After taking it, the old maid thanked her profusely and left. Miss, did she really find out that Qing Shui did it? Chu Lu looked at the back of the old maid suspiciously. Qing Shui contacted her occasionally. What Qing Shui said when she left still lingered in her ears. After that, Qing Shui did send some news from time to time, but Qing Shui never said it. It's fake. Qin Wanru slightly raised the corner of her mouth. Fake? Not only Chu Lu was stunned, but Qing Yu and Yu Jie were also stunned. The three servant girls looked at each other suspiciously and then turned their eyes to Qin Wanru. Yu Jie was the most straightforward and said directly, Miss, how do you know that what the old maid said is fake? I sent you to check the mold before, but you just checked it. You didn't say anything and didn't say how important this set of molds was. How dare an old maid report such a small thing to me, unless she knows the importance of this set of molds? Qin Wanru analyzed slowly in a low voice. Her clear watery eyes were as cold as ice crystals. Who else in this mansion knew the importance of this set of molds? Except for Madame D and her daughter, no one really noticed it before. Shui Rulin didn't know it at first, and it was not until her grandmother found it. No matter how she thought about it, only Madame D and her daughter could know it. Now an ordinary old maid in the kitchen also knew it. Who else could it be but Madame D's person? Calculating the time when the so-called pastry shop had an accident, it happened to be when Qin Wanru's family went to the capital city. At that time, in order to select people, many servants entered the mansion. More than half of the servants in the mansion entered at this time, so it was not so easy to check. Then she is Madame D's person. Is it possible that she is also a person specially arranged by Duke Yong's mansion before and has an important role? Yu Jie was shocked, but immediately understood and said with her eyes wide open. The mold is very important. Qin Wanru said meaningfully. This was a crucial evidence that could prove Qin Yuru's real identity. Madame D should want to send this set of molds to Duke Xing's mansion at the most appropriate time quietly. Of course, it was better not to arouse Grandma's suspicion. However, this set of molds had been in the past for a long time, and Madame Dowager might not remember it. Even if it was really used, as long as Madame Dowager couldn't find out who sent it to the kitchen, this matter could only be left unsettled. As long as Qin Yuru entered the eyes of Duke Xing's mansion, these things were not a big deal. Since the old maid is Madame D's person, why did she say that Madame D sent someone to put the molds in the kitchen? Chu Lu still didn't understand. This matter seemed to be quite contradictory. It was done by one of their own people, and one of their own people took the initiative to provide evidence. No matter how she looked at it, it was unreasonable. Don't you think it is very unreasonable? Qin Wanru smiled. Chu Lu nodded and said, I just don't understand why this matter is so weird and makes people think that Miss guessed wrong. After all, Qin Yu was the one who had been with Qin Wanru for the longest time. Hearing Chu Li's words, she suddenly understood and said, Miss, they deliberately made so many things to make Miss believe it. But if Miss takes this as evidence, in fact, there is no evidence. Not only will it not make people believe it, but it will also make people think that you are framing Madame D and First Mississippi. Her words made Yu Jie and Chu Lu take a deep breath. Madame D could really do this kind of thing. More than that. Just now she said that Qing Shui put the molds in the kitchen. But Qing Shui used to be my person. Although she is now serving Madame D, it is difficult to guarantee that she is definitely not my person. Qin Wanru's smile was as calm as usual. She slightly raised the corners of her mouth and smiled sweetly, but her eyes were cold and deep. Sure enough, the role of this old maid was not only that set of molds. What should we do? Chu Lu was a little flustered. Miss, let me secretly beat this old maid so that she can't take charge of the kitchen. Yu Jie suggested. Qin Wanru shook her head and said, Chu Lu, later go to the kitchen and tell the old maid to make some beautiful pastries so that I like to use her pastries. As for other places, ask her to make some and send some to other places. Why does Miss ask this old maid to send pastries? Isn't it obvious that Miss appreciates her? Yu Jie asked. Of course she appreciates her. Otherwise, isn't it a waste of an excellent person? Chu Lu, next time you meet Qing Shui, tell her about this and ask her to be careful. Don't become a scapegoat. Qin Wanru instructed Chu Lu. Yes, miss, I know. Chu Lu nodded. Qing Shui would definitely not bribe Miss for the sake of her family. Chu Lu was very clear about this. Spread the news that I have been rewarded by the Empress Dowager and Prince Chen. Let everyone in the mansion know about this. Then ask Nanny Yu to give purses to the people in my yard. It is a blessing. Qin Wanru's hand gently stroked the white fat cat in her hand. This cat was very fat. It was tiring to hold it for a long time. However, it recognized people and did not allow the servant girls to get close to it. Qin Wanru had no choice but to hold it for a while. Yes, miss, I will do it in a moment. Qing Shui nodded. She usually helped Nanny Yu to deal with this kind of thing. Yu Jie, if the heir of Duke Yong comes, keep an eye on him. I heard that the heir of Duke Yong got drunk that day and took a servant girl from Duke Xing's mansion. Qin Wanru stroked the cat's head again and smiled slightly. Qin Yuru was not a person who could tolerate others. Miss, the heir of Duke Yong has already come to the mansion. He came here before. Qing Yu's eyes lit up and said hurriedly. She had seen him before. He is still here. Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows. She was not surprised. After such a thing happened yesterday, Duke Yong's mansion had to come and ask if Qin Yuru had been discovered. Yes, he hasn't left. I heard that he went to First Mrs. Yard. Later, he left in a huff and went to the yard arranged for him by the mansion. He hasn't left yet. Qin Yu nodded and said. Chapter 352. Mother, it's impossible. This should be a misunderstanding. Maybe the servants made a mistake and sent this set of molds directly to the kitchen. Qin Huayong frowned and said. There was no one else in the room except for the mother and the son. Even Nanny Duan tactfully went out. Now she stood at the door, faintly hearing the conversation in the room. She frowned when she heard it occasionally. This matter was really difficult to deal with. Without real evidence, this matter was a mess. How could it be so simple to clear it up? Yong, her, Zhuizhua's biological father also asked you to find her mother and other family members. A person like him should be born in a very unusual family. Maybe he is from the capital city. Why don't you tell the truth about Zhuizhua's identity and find out if there is anyone in the capital city who matches her biological father's situation? Madame Dowager sighed deeply and said. Mother, didn't you say at that time that you would treat Wanru as your biological daughter? Madame D did a bad job before, and now I don't allow her to intervene in Wanru's affairs. Ruolin is in charge of Wanru, and I also hired etiquette instructors from the palace to teach her. Wanru is very good now. Do you want her to know that her biological father and mother have passed away? Let her bear the cruel fact that both of her parents died. Qin Huayong poured a cup of tea for Madame Dowager and whispered to her. His words made Madame Dowager silent for a while, and then she said, but now there may be real news about Zhuizhua's parents. We can't stop her family from reuniting, can we? Mother, I didn't say that we can't let Wanru find her family. But before we find her family, we still can't tell the truth, lest she knows it and can do nothing. She will be sad for nothing. Moreover, if that family really cares about Wanru, why haven't we heard from them for so many years? They didn't even ask about Wanru's affairs. Qin Huayong still held an attitude of opposition and said. What he said was also very reasonable, and Madame Dowager could not help but fall silent again. Mother, don't worry. I've been in the capital city for some time now and I've learned some things. I'll send someone to investigate Wanru's matter when I have time. But it has to be done secretly and it's inconvenient to let Wanru know first. What do you think, Mother? Qin Huayong said gently when he saw Madame Dowager was silent. Her words were very reasonable. Old Grandma nodded helplessly, but she couldn't solve the doubts in her heart. Maybe Madame D really has something to do with that set of molds. Mother, why do you suddenly think so? Qin Huayong asked in surprise. Madame D can't protect herself now. She can't go out at all. The two old maids guarding the door keep a close eye on her. Since she was locked in the yard, she has never gone out. Mother, did you misunderstand something? Was there a misunderstanding? The madam did not think so, but some words seemed to be stuck in her throat. Looking at her son's sincere face, her heart seemed to be heavily suppressed by something. She didn't know where to start with the thousands of words she wanted to say. Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion sent someone here today to suppress Zhuizhua. After a long time, Madame Dowager only said these words. As soon as she said these words, she felt inexplicably relieved in her heart, but she also felt very gloomy and unspeakably sad. Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion seems to really like Yuru. She believed the rumors and thought that Wanru bullied Yuru, so she came to support Yuru. Fortunately, Nanny Yu is also reasonable. She heard that it was not Wanru's fault, so she didn't force Wanru to admit her mistake. Later, she even specially said that she wanted to thank Wanru. Wanru had met Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion before, and it was Wanru who saved Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion. Qin Huayong showed a smile on his face, and he was obviously very satisfied with this matter. Wanru saved old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion. Madame Dowager said in surprise. Yes, she did. It was Nanny Yu who served old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion who recognized her and said that she would definitely thank Wanru. Mother, don't worry. If old Madame of Duke Xing likes Yuru and Wanru, it will be good for them and even for our whole mansion. Qin Huayong looked very happy, and his voice was a little higher. Madame Dowager fell silent again. Although there was a smile on her face, the smile was very faint. Of course, she knew her son's thoughts. Qin's mansion had just moved to the capital city and did not have a deep foundation. If it could get the support of Duke Xing's mansion, it would be a great thing. Why did old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion suddenly like Yuru? Does Duke Xing's mansion have anything to do with Zhuozhua's background? Madame Dowager said this with some hesitation. Mother, how is this possible? What kind of mansion is Duke Xing's mansion? If the child of their mansion disappeared, how could there be no news for so many years? Moreover, I have been in the capital city for a period of time, but I have not heard that Duke Xing's mansion lost a child. Qin Huayong said. His words were extremely decisive and without any hesitation. Madame Dowager felt that her previous doubts had been shaken. Could it be that she had really thought wrong? Mother, if you think that I may not know the inside story, when Madame of Duke Xing comes next time, you can think of a way to ask her. If you really get something out of her, we will deal with it. What do you think? Qin Huayong said considerately to Madame Dowager. Hearing his words, Madame Dowager nodded repeatedly. She also felt that she had made a fuss before and connected many things. The more she thought about it, the more suspicious she felt. Maybe it was really just a coincidence and a misunderstanding. Thinking of this, she was slightly relieved and immediately nodded in agreement. After that, the mother and son talked about some intimate things. Qin Huayong stood up and said goodbye. In the past, he would go to see Shui Rulan at this time. The affairs of the mansion have been properly prepared for the spring festival. Tell Rulan not to worry anymore and just to take good care of the fetus. The two concubines are more capable and can also do their jobs well. The most important thing is the child in the belly. Madame Dowager said worriedly. Qin Huayong promised them one by one with a smile without any impatience, which made Madame Dowager more satisfied. After Qin Huayong left, Madame Dowager rested in the room alone in silence. Nanny Duan walked in quietly. Maybe I thought wrong. Madame Dowager sighed in a low voice. Nanny Duan poured another cup of tea for Madame Dowager and changed the tea that she had drunk before. She softly comforted Madame Dowager, who looked uneasy, and said, Madame Dowager, this matter is not urgent. Whether Madame D and First Miss have the intention or not, the General has promised to investigate secretly. If not, let it go. If not, we have to think about it in the long run. Her words reminded Madame Dowager that if it was true, Madame of Duke Xing's attitude towards Zhuozhuo was not good. It was probably not a good thing. She immediately nodded and said, don't tell Zhuozhuo about it for the time being. Let's talk about it after Yong has investigated it clearly. Madame Dowager originally wanted to tell Qin Wanru the truth of that year, but after Qin Huayong's words just now, she also felt that it was reasonable. We can only do this for the time being. Hearing Nanny Duan's advice, Madame Dowager also nodded and temporarily put aside this matter that made her feel urgent. How is Rulan? Madame Dowager, don't worry. I have asked her before. Madame Shui thinks that she is fine and has nothing serious. She told you not to worry. Nanny Duan said with a smile. This child has a big heart too. Such a big thing happened yesterday, but she didn't ask someone to tell me. Madame Dowager sighed and said helplessly. Madame Dowager, don't worry. Take good care of yourself first. When Madame Shui gives birth to a child, you can hold a grandson. Nanny Duan said. Her words made Madame Dowager happy and laughed. But then she frowned again and couldn't hide the worry between her eyebrows. I always hope that they are not too open-minded. Our Chin's mansion is too small and can't afford to suffer. Nanny Duan did not answer. She held Madame Dowager's arm and couldn't hide the worry in her eyes. When Huang Rui went out, she found an excuse to peep at First Mississippi. This excuse could be used at any time in front of Madame D. Just now, she heard the conversation between the two old maids guarding the door and a servant girl. The servant girl said that Child D had sent her here. She said that Child D had originally intended to visit Madame D in person, but because he argued with First Miss, he was not in a good mood, so he sent someone to inquire about Madame D's situation. The servant girl said that it seemed that Child D was very angry and might not come to see Madame D this time. The servant girl asked about Madame D. Seeing her at the door, the two old maids called her over. The servant girl asked a few words in a businesslike manner and then left. After she left, Huang Rui rolled her eyes and found such an excuse. After getting Madame D's consent, she went back to dress up again and then went out of the courtyard. After going out of the courtyard, she directly went to Di Yan's yard in Qin's mansion. When she arrived at the gate of the garden, she saw a servant standing there. She first tidied up her clothes and then hurried over. Because she walked in a hurry, her face became more pink and delicate. Is the child inside? Huang Rui went forward and asked the servant. The servant looked her up and down and asked, "Who are you? Why do you want to see our child?" "I am Madame D's servant. I was sent here by Duke Yong's mansion to serve Madame D. I heard that the child and First Miss were a little unhappy just now, so Madame D specially asked me to ask." Huang Rui said. On the way, she had already thought of the reason. The previous conversation between the servant girl and the old maid made this reason very reasonable. "Wait here. I will report to the child," the servant said, then turned back and ran in. After a while, he ran out and said, "Go in. Our child asked you to go in." After saying that, he carefully lowered his voice and said, "The child is not in a very good mood. If you have something to say, say it quickly. Don't make the child unhappy." "Thank you. I got it." Huang Rui nodded with a smile and turned to go to the main room. In the main room, Di Yan sat on the chair with a gloomy face. When he went to see Qin Yuru just now, he just said that he took a servant girl away from Duke Xing's mansion yesterday, and Qin Yuru made a big fuss. Speaking of this, Di Yan also felt very wronged. He drank too much wine, and a servant girl inexplicably lay beside him, and his sister saw it. When the matter was made, he had to take the servant girl away. Thinking about it, he felt depressed. But since it happened and Duke Xing generously asked him to take the servant girl away, how could he not take her away? Chapter 353. Child, let me ask you. Did you quarrel with First Miss today? Madam is very worried. Huang Rui came in, bowed gracefully and said coquettishly. A pair of coquettish eyes slid over Di Yan's face, making him feel numb in his heart. Compared with the one he brought back from Duke Xing's mansion yesterday, Huang Rui was much more beautiful. Since he saw Huang Rui last time, Di Yan had actually fallen in love with her. Get up. You are called Huang Rui, right? Seeing such a beautiful and gentle woman appear in front of him, Di Yan's heart was hot. At this time, there were no outsiders in the room, so he personally came to hold Huang Rui's hand and asked softly. Di Yan felt that the beautiful woman in front of him was in line with what he wanted. She had an outstanding appearance and was not worse than Qin Yuru. Among the women he knew before, Qin Yuru was the best. Ning Kaixian was not as beautiful as Qin Yuru, but she was gentle and affectionate, which made people dote on her. Unfortunately, she was gone now. Every time he thought of this, Di Yan felt pity. If only Qin Yuru was as gentle and obedient as Ning Kaixian. In fact, when they first met, Qin Yuru was also a delicate and obedient woman. Di Yan didn't know why she seemed to change into another person later. She became more and more hot-tempered and not in line with Di Yan's expectations. Just like today, when he said this, Qin Yuru smashed the cup and asked him to leave. Di Yan had never been asked to leave by someone like this. At that time, he was so angry that he turned around and left, ignoring the earth-shattering cry coming from behind. He would listen to his grandmother's words and come over to talk to Qin Yuru about the servant girl. He would also ask her what happened when she went back yesterday and whether she needed his mansion's help. After being rebuked by Qin Yuru, Di Yan was not in the mood to ask more questions and went back to his courtyard in a huff. When he was full of depression, he saw Huang Rui and immediately felt that the woman in front of him was what he liked most, no matter her appearance or her gentle temperament. This kind of girl from a humble family was more innocent than ordinary servant girls. She didn't deliberately flatter him and was the most natural. He reached out and touched Huang Rui's smooth hand with great enjoyment. "Child," Huang Rui said coquettishly with a pink face. She seemed to want to push his hand away, but she was a woman and was not as strong as Di Yan. As soon as Di Yan exerted force, she immediately fell into Di Yan's arms. She hurriedly stretched out her hand to support Di Yan, but Di Yan's other hand had hugged Huang Rui's slender waist, and her whole body was stuck to him. Feeling the delicate body in his arms trembling, Di Yan's voice became increasingly gentle. He coaxed in a low voice, "Don't be afraid, I won't hurt you. Don't worry, I'll just hug you for a while. No one will see. I just can't help it." "Prince, this servant is scared." Huang Rui raised her beautiful eyes, looking flustered and scared like a frightened deer. Her eyes softened Di Yan's heart. Thinking of her appearance as a girl from a good family, Di Yan felt that she must be a girl from a good family who had just entered the mansion as a slave and had never seen such a thing. Di Yan felt more and more sorry for her. "Don't be afraid. I'll ask my aunt for you. From now on, you will serve me exclusively. Prince, this servant is a servant girl in your mansion." Huang Rui blushed and said. "A servant girl sent by our mansion to my aunt?" Di Yan's eyes brightened, and he immediately understood. He was overjoyed and hugged her tighter. The delicate body in his arms was like water, which made his heart soften. The previous annoyance because of Qin Yuru had already been forgotten. At this time, he even forgot that this was not his mansion, but Qin's mansion. "Yes, it's old Madam who sent me to serve Madam D. My purchase contract is still in old Madam's hands," Huang Rui said in an extremely weak voice, looking very pitiful. She no longer struggled, reached out to hold his hand, and looked at him in a sweet voice. The feeling of craving for others' pity made Di Yan more enthusiastic. Since this person was from his mansion, he didn't need to be polite. He picked up Huang Rui and went to the inner room, saying, "Don't worry. I will ask old Madam for your indenture when I go back. In the future, this indenture will belong to you. You just need to wait on me in my room." Di Yan nodded. "Thank you, Prince." Huang Rui was overjoyed. She didn't expect that she could get everything she wanted so easily. If she could really get back her purchase contract, even if she followed Di Yan, her status in the future would not be comparable to that of an ordinary servant or a concubine. If she could make the prince pity her more, she could even enter the mansion as a noble concubine. A noble concubine was completely different from an ordinary concubine. Thinking of this, her face became more and more ruddy. She had been trained and knew what to do at this time. When she was pushed to the bed by Di Yan, her hands were still holding her belt tightly, and her eyes were full of tears. She looked at Di Yan pitifully and said in a sweet voice, "Prince, I am afraid." First Miss. In the past few days, she also found that Child D obviously didn't like First Miss Qin very much. "Don't care about her. She hasn't married into the mansion yet. Even if she marries into the mansion, she must listen to me. If I want to take a concubine, she can't have the final say. She won't get married in the next 2 years. I can't keep an empty room all the time." At this time, Di Yan was already very excited. After being stopped by Huang Rui, he increasingly felt that Qin Yuru was not a problem. Prince, I will belong to you in the future. I hope that you will pity me. If you betray me, I am afraid that I will only have a dead end. Huang Rui knew when to stop. She loosened her hands and looked up at Di Yan with 2 drops of tears sliding down her beautiful face. At this moment, Di Yan felt that even if he died, he would protect Huang Rui and would never let Huang Rui go to the same situation as Ning Kaixian. If Qin Yuru really dared to deal with Huang Rui, he would not be polite. Okay, good girl. Don't worry. When I find the right opportunity, I will take you away. Di Yan reached out to hold Huang Rui and kissed her. Huang Rui had been in the room for a while, but there was no sound inside. The servant carefully walked to the door and poked his head in, but he didn't see his master. He listened and heard some familiar voices inside. Then he covered his mouth and retreated with a smile. He had guessed so. Such a charming little beauty. There was no servant girl in his mansion who was so beautiful. He didn't expect that there was such an excellent servant girl in Qin's mansion. Child would never let her go. The servant retreated to the door of the courtyard again, poked his head out and looked carefully. When he found no one, the smile on his face became more and more complacent. First Miss Qin just let his child go, and then she regretted and cried. She wanted his child to go back and comfort her. She didn't know what kind of person the child was. How could he be humble every time? Look, now she must be regretful to death after knowing this. Yesterday, it was just a servant girl who was forced to marry the child. Today, it was the one who won the child's heart. The servant smacked his lips and suddenly felt that first Miss Qin would be anxious and angry when she saw this. But it was she who let his child go. When he was complacent, he suddenly saw the corner of a servant girl's clothes sweeping past the bushes on the right front. He immediately became serious and shouted in that direction, Who is there? Come out quickly. After saying that, he stared at that place closely, but there was no sound over there, as if he had seen it wrong just now. The servant felt that he did not see it wrong. The bushes over there were withered. He clearly saw a green corner of the clothes just now. It could not be leaves or branches. Who is there? He shouted again. There was still no sound over there. The servant walked over impatiently. When he got close, he walked around the bushes, but there was really no one. How is it possible? I clearly saw someone just now. Suddenly, his eyes brightened. He saw a handkerchief falling at the bottom of the bushes. He picked it up and had a look. Although the material was ordinary, it must be a woman's thing. Needless to say, he did not see it wrong just now. Someone must be hiding here. Hearing his shout, the servant ran away. His face could not help but tighten. If there was anyone in the Qin's mansion who stared at his child, there was no one except first Miss Qin. Thinking of this, the servant was a little flustered. If first Miss Qin knew that the child and a servant girl were inside, she might make trouble again. Grabbing the handkerchief, the servant carefully returned to the gate of the courtyard to guard. He looked at the door of the house from a distance and felt that he had to wait for a while. Seeing the servant take the handkerchief and leave, Yujia turned and left from the hiding place. After Huang Rui was cheated out, she followed her all the way. At this time, she deliberately showed her figure and left the handkerchief, which was also her miss's idea. Yujia now admired her miss more and more. Although she did not understand her meaning very well, she still completely carried out her meaning. Miss, Huang Rui really went in. Returning to the room, Yujia lifted the curtain and reported in a low voice. For this result, Qin Wanru was very clear. This Huang Rui was obviously not an ordinary woman, but she pretended to be a girl from a good family. She was a very kind girl from a humble family. In the last life, even people like Qin Huayong doted on her, which showed how great her means were. In this life, she had cut off her thoughts early, and she had no chance to see Qin Huayong and seduce him. In addition, Shui Rulan was very good in this life, and Madame D did not secretly help Huang Rui to deal with Shui Rulan. Moreover, she was pregnant now. Coupled with the troubles of Madame D and Qin Yuru, Qin Huayong was not in the mood to take a concubine at this time. As a result, although Huang Rui entered the Qin's mansion, she had no chance to achieve her goal. Even because she followed Madame D, she was ridiculed by other servants in the mansion, and her life was not very good. Di Yan's appearance could be regarded as a relief for Huang Rui. With Huang Rui's temperament, how could she not go to seduce Di Yan after being reminded twice? One was willing to be beaten, and the other was willing to be beaten. But it depended on how Qin Yuru would jump next. It was said that the reason why they quarreled before was because of a servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion. Now Qin Yuru was still crying in her yard, while Di Yan had a new wife. Chapter 354. What? Is this true? Qin Yuru sat heavily on the chair, and her face changed from blue to white. She pinched her fingers into her flesh and gritted her teeth. Of course, she had seen the little bitch named Huang Rui. Her coquettish look was unpleasant to look at. Qin Yuru sat on the chair heavily. Madame D had told her that this servant girl was sent by Duke Yong's mansion for Qin Huayong. Although Qin Yuru was indignant, she knew that this was the best way now. If she didn't want Shui Rulan to be the sole ruler in the mansion, she must find such a person to divide the favor or snatch Shui Rulan's favor. Therefore, even if she didn't like it, Qin Yuru wouldn't say anything. Moreover, this was a matter of her parents' room. As a daughter, she couldn't directly interfere. She didn't expect that the little bitch had hooked up with Di Yan. How could she not be angry? She picked up the teacup beside her and smashed it on the ground. She suddenly stood up and gnashed her teeth, saying, "Let's go. Take some old maids there and beat that little bitch to death." After saying that, she went out. Mei Shui and Mei Yan saw that it was not good. They hugged Qin Yuru together and said anxiously, "First miss, don't be anxious. This matter can be considered at length. Qin Yuru just made a mistake and was sent here to learn etiquette. It had only been a day. If such a thing happened again, the two servant girls would have to bear the consequences." When the first miss learned the rules, the two servant girls also learned the rules from Nanny Huang. They were severely scolded by Nanny Huang and were punished to stand for several hours. They didn't recover even after sleeping. Until now, their bodies felt weak and powerless. "Let go of me." Qin Yuru struggled but failed. She was so angry that she slapped each of the two servant girls. At this time, she was so angry that she wanted to tear Di Yan apart. Yesterday, a servant girl was hurt. Today, they actually dared to mess with her in her mansion. Moreover, it was under her eyes. "First miss, don't go first. Discuss it with Madam first. If something really happens, Madam will be prepared. First miss, don't worry. I will go to find Madam right away." The two girls ignored the burning pain on their faces and refused to let go with tears in their eyes. While they were busy, they suddenly heard a low cough coming from outside. Hearing the cough, the two servant girls were overjoyed. They pulled Qin Yuru desperately while looking at the door. Nanny Huang came in and looked at Qin Yuru with a sullen face. In fact, Duke Yong's mansion asked her to teach Qin Yuru. If Qin Yuru didn't teach her well, she would lose her reputation. "Eldest miss, where are you going?" Seeing that it was Nanny Huang, Qin Yuru felt sorry for her hand. After coming back yesterday, she was severely reprimanded by Nanny Huang and even slapped her palm. Until now, her palm was still swollen. At this moment, when she saw Nanny Huang, she felt a little embarrassed. "I'm going to kill that bitch who seduced Di Yan," Qin Yuru said angrily, but she did not do anything drastic. The two maids breathed a sigh of relief. They let go of Qin Yuru and retreated to the side. They looked at each other and felt as if they had just escaped death. The girl who seduced the heir. What's going on? Nanny Huang came in a hurry and did not know what had happened. Qin Yuru returned to the chair angrily and sat down. Mei Shui hurried forward and told her the cause and effect of the matter. First miss, what do you want to do by making such a scene now? After hearing it, Nanny Huang also sat down on the chair beside and looked at Qin Yuru coldly. I want to kill that bitch. Qin Yuru said with a livid face. What will happen after she is killed? Will she make the heir angry? Will the two families break off the engagement? Nanny Huang frowned and said. She also disliked the fact that Madame D's servant girl was so unruly and even seduced Child D. She had seen that charming servant girl at that time. Originally, she thought that Madame D prepared her for Ningyuan army general. But how could she seduce Child D? Nanny Huang had experienced a lot of things. She had seen a lot of such servant girls who climbed the bed in the backyard. The servant girl who seemed to come from a good family was actually a shrewd one. Nanny Huang had educated many people. Judging from the servant girl named Huang Rui, it was obvious that she had been educated. She was not the kind of natural innocence. If such a servant girl did not seduce Child D sincerely, it would not be so easy for Child D to get her. So on the other hand, this servant girl did it on purpose. Wasn't she found by Madame D for the general to help her? Nanny Huang felt a little confused. She increasingly felt that she had made a mistake when she promised Countess Yong. But now she was in the same boat with Qin Yuru and had to help her. She also wanted to educate other misses from aristocratic families in the future. If her reputation was ruined because of Qin Yuru, who would ask her to educate the misses in their mansions in the future? As long as she thought of this, Nanny Huang felt that Qin Yuru was a big trouble. She also secretly decided that if there was such a thing in the future, she must investigate it clearly. She would not trap herself again because of the generous reward. So be it. Who cares about him? Compared to Qi Tianyu, Di Yan is nothing. He has neither a good character nor a good appearance. Qin Yuru said angrily and blurted out. These days, she had actually been thinking whether she was right to listen to Madame D's words and abandon Qi Tianyu. But the conclusion she got was right. She was beautiful and had a noble identity. Not to mention Qi Tianyu, Di Yan was also not worthy of her. With Duke Xing's mansion as her backing, she could marry anyone she wanted. Now Di Yan was not the best choice, she thought. She even thought that if she had not been engaged to Di Yan at that time, she might still be the princess of those unmarried princes. Only then would she be worthy of Qin Yuru's identity. Of course, she also knew that she and Di Yan had been engaged, so she could only think about it with regret. Now she was really angry and blurted out the words in her heart. First miss, please be careful with your words. Nanny Huang slammed her hand on the table and said sternly. Qin Yuru was shocked, but she also knew that she could not say this. She bit her lip and whispered unwillingly, Di Yan did not live up to expectations. Who can he blame? He just brought a servant girl from Duke Xing's mansion here yesterday. Does he want to take another one from our mansion? Nanny, I can't swallow this anger. After being disciplined yesterday, Qin Yuru saw that Nanny Huang was a little timid. She was not as arrogant and threatening as before. First miss, you have to remember that you are not married yet. You are only the first miss of Qin's mansion. You can't directly interfere with the affairs in Child D's room. Moreover, even if you have married Child D now, this kind of thing has already happened. You can only pinch your nose and bring her in. You have to remember that you will be the legal wife in the future. No one can surpass you. Seeing that Qin Yuru was willing to listen to her, Nanny Huang's face became a little better and she said earnestly. First miss, you have to swallow this anger even if you don't want to. No, I can't. How can Di Yan bully me like this? Does he really think that our mansion needs to rely on them? Qin Yuru said angrily. First miss, this servant girl is Madame's servant. You can ask Madame to help. Nanny Huang said earnestly. Mother? Qin Yuru said. She knew Di Yan's character very well. Mother can't even protect herself now. How can she deal with this matter? Even if mother takes action, Di Yan will know it's related to me and blame it on me. First miss, I don't mean to ask Madam D to kill the servant girl. Since this servant girl is to be given to the general, Madam can think of a way to give her to the general. If the general finds out what happened, he will deal with it. At that time, child D owes you and naturally has to give you an explanation. And the servant girl will not survive. Nanny Huang deserved to be an etiquette instructor. In a few words, she had set up a trap, which immediately suppressed Qin Yuru's anger. After her eyes flickered a few times, she nodded and agreed with Nanny Huang. After this matter was pushed out of Qin Yuru's hands, whether it was Madame D or Qin Huayong who dealt with this matter, it had nothing to do with Qin Yuru. Naturally, she would not ruin the reputation of her etiquette instructor. Mei Shui, now go to see Nanny Zhou secretly and tell her about the bitch. Let Nanny Zhou tell my mother to take the bitch to my father and let my father deal with the bitch. As long as her father found that this servant girl was not a virgin, he would definitely interrogate her. With her father's means, it was easy to interrogate a servant girl. At that time, Di Yan not only owed her but also owed her father. How could he have the face to be tough in front of her in the future? Thinking of this, she couldn't help sneering. Huang Rui, the bitch, dared to seduce my servant girl. She will die without a burial place. Yes, I will go right away. Seeing that Qin Yuru had been persuaded, Mei Shui was relieved and hurried to find Nanny Zhou. First miss, you should pretend that you don't know this matter. If child D comes later, you can't mention this matter. Nanny Huang warned. Nanny, don't worry. I will pay attention to it. I will only mention the servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion yesterday. Qin Yuru gritted her teeth and said. She really couldn't bear it. If Di Yan came later, she must make trouble again with the matter of the servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion to vent her anger. If she had known that Di Yan was such a person, of course, she would not have dumped Qi Tianyu. At this moment, Qin Yuru increasingly felt that Qi Tianyu was as handsome as jade and had a noble character. He not only obeyed her all the time, but also knew what was good for him. He also kept himself clean and did not even have a servant girl who had sex with him. Compared with Di Yan, who had a servant girl early and had sex with many women, the difference was like heaven and earth. Qin Yuru even felt that it was all Madame D's fault. If Madame D had not repeatedly told her how rich, beautiful and powerful Duke Yong's mansion was, she would not have done that. In fact, her mother was a little short-sighted. If there was medicine for regret in this world, Qin Yuru felt that she would take it without hesitation. First miss, you don't need to mention this matter again. It is just a servant girl. Mei Shui just said that child D said that he was drunk at that time and didn't know why the servant girl was with him. If first Miss D didn't happen to see it at this time, he would not admit it at that time. But at that time, many people saw it, so he had to take the servant girl back. So what? If he could control himself, there wouldn't be so many things. I haven't married into his family, but there have been 8 or 10 servants in his yard. Qin Yuru sneered. Chapter 355. First miss, the calmer you are at this moment, the guiltier the air will feel for you. Seeing that Qin Yuru still looked pale, Nanny Huang tried to persuade her again. Eldest young miss, the heir is here. While they were talking, a maid reported from outside the room. Let him in. Qin Yuru said angrily. Nanny Huang's gaze fell on the broken teacup and she motioned Mei Yan to clean up the broken cup. His face was slightly pale. As soon as he entered the door, his eyes fell on Mei Yan. Mei Yan was cleaning up the broken cups on the floor. The water stains were very clear. Obviously, it had just happened and was not caused by him when he left. His eyebrows twitched involuntarily and he panicked. After fooling around with Huang Rui, he reluctantly let Huang Rui go. Before he tasted it, he heard the servant reporting what happened before. He couldn't help sweating in a cold sweat and hurriedly came to find out what happened. Now that he saw that the debris on the ground was from a moment ago, he felt even more guilty. After coming in, Nanny Huang tried her best to keep a straight face and sat down on the chair beside Qin Yuru. Nanny Huang left silently. Before leaving, she winked at Qin Yuru. "Cousin Yu, I really don't know what happened yesterday, and I don't know how this servant girl came to my side. If you don't believe me, next time you come to our mansion, you can directly ask me. I'll throw her in a corner of the yard now. If she wasn't a servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion, I would have sold her." Di Yan straightened his face and apologized sincerely. For the sake of Duke Xing's mansion, he really didn't care about that servant girl at all. It was just that he was annoyed by Qin Yuru before, so he left angrily. Now what happened with Huang Rui made him feel really guilty, so he pushed the servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion out. "Cousin, are you really doing this for the sake of Duke Xing's mansion?" Qin Yuru snorted coldly. "Cousin Yu, for the sake of Duke Xing's mansion, of course. You know, Duke Xing's mansion is not an ordinary mansion in the capital city. Even father and grandmother have to look up to the servant girls in his mansion. If what I said is not true, let me be struck by lightning." Di Yan pointed to the heavens and swore. What he said was true, and that was indeed what he thought. Qin Yuru was so angry that her whole body trembled. She almost couldn't control herself and wanted to pull out the thing about Huang Rui, the bitch, and throw it in his face. When she asked him about the servant girl and asked him to leave out of anger, he left without looking back. She cried so loudly behind him. She didn't believe that he couldn't hear it. But now, for the sake of Huang Rui, the bitch, he actually came to her and explained the previous things clearly. The purpose was to not make her angry. But this was not for herself, but for Huang Rui. As long as Qin Yuru thought about this, she would be very angry. It's good that cousin can think this way. I'm tired and want to rest for a while. Cousin, please go ahead. Qin Yuru felt that if she allowed Di Yan to stay any longer, she might not be able to control herself. Okay, then I'll go back first. I'll come back when cousin Yu is no longer angry. Di Yan immediately stood up with a guilty conscience and said with a smile. Qin Yuru ignored him, stood up and walked to the inner room. Mei Yan hurriedly followed her. Seeing that Qin Yuru went in without looking back and really left him here, Di Yan also became angry. But he was guilty and didn't dare to say anything. He fixed his eyes on Qin Yuru's inner room and looked at the debris on the ground that hadn't been cleaned up. Then he turned and left. When he got out of the door, he thought for a while, turned in another direction and strode to Madame D's Yulon pavilion. He couldn't say something to Qin Yuru, but he could say it to his aunt. She was just a servant girl, and he thought his aunt wouldn't say much. Moreover, she was sent by his mansion. Strictly speaking, this servant girl belonged to his mansion. There were a lot of servant girls serving his aunt. He could send a few more next time. Di Yan thought so and looked relaxed. Compared with Qin Yuru, his aunt, Madame D, should be much easier to talk with. In the past, his aunt was very polite and enthusiastic when she saw him. When Qin Wanru came to Shui Rulan's Lufeng courtyard, Qin Huayong was also there. They were talking and the atmosphere in the room was good. When Qin Wanru came in, Shui Rulan was eating pastries, but they were pastries from her small kitchen. Qin Wanru came in with Yujie. After bowing to them respectively, she asked Yujie to take out the needles. "Mother, let me feel your pulse." Qin Wanru said softly. Shui Rulan nodded. After cleaning her hands, she put her wrist on a book to support it. Qin Wanru reached out to feel Shui Rulan's pulse. Then, he switched to his other hand. The room was very quiet, and even Qin Huayong didn't say anything. After feeling her pulse, Qin Wanru opened her eyes with a smile on her face. "Father, Mother, it's nothing serious. You just need to take good care of yourself. Don't get angry too much." "That's good. Yuru, let the two concubines handle the affairs of the mansion. You should take good care of yourself first. Qin Huayong also breathed a sigh of relief. After all, Shui Rulan was a child he had high hopes for. After knowing this yesterday, he was also shocked. Today he came to accompany Shui Rulan when he was free. Do I still need acupuncture? Shui Rulan looked at Qin Wanru's set of needles in a panic, and the smile on her face was a little stiff. Several needles were very long, which made people panic. Seeing Shui Rulan's nervous look, Qin Wanru smiled and shook her head. Mother, don't worry. You don't need acupuncture now. I brought it here because I was afraid that you would feel uncomfortable. Now that you have recovered, there is no need for needles. That's good, that's good. Shui Rulan breathed a sigh of relief. Wanru used this to save old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion. Qin Huayong asked with a smile. It was the first time for him to see Qin Wanru's set of needles. Yes, when I met her on the road, I didn't know she was old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion. Seeing that she was seriously ill at that time, I saved her. Qin Wanru answered generously. Wanru has always been kind. Shui Rulan sighed. How are Wanru's medical skills? Qin Huayong's eyes still fell on the set of needles. He seemed to be a little curious, but a trace of darkness flashed in his eyes. His second daughter was a useful person. If he didn't see this set of needles, he would really neglect it. It should be okay. Qin Wanru said with a smile. Wanru's medical skills are very good. She also helped to cure my body before. Shui Rulan said. The two of them spoke almost at the same time. After they finished speaking, the two of them laughed. Wanru, can you let me see your medical skills? Qin Huayong also smiled, and his kind eyes fell on Qin Wanru's face. This, how to see? Qin Wanru said awkwardly. I want to see whether Wanru's pulse feeling is accurate. Qin Huayong thought for a while and said. Looking for a patient? Qin Wanru said awkwardly. General, this is not good. Wanru is a lady from a noble family. Do you want to look for someone casually? Shui Rulan thought it was not good. How could a lady from a noble family really show up in public to look for a patient? How about feeling my pulse? Okay. You can try it on me. How can you do this? You are not sick, and you are pregnant. Qin Huayong refused without thinking. Then, who else is sick in the mansion? Shui Rulan deliberately emphasized the word mansion in order to remind Qin Huayong that it was not convenient for Qin Wanru to go outside to treat people. Go to Yulan Pavilion. Qin Huayong said. His words surprised Shui Rulan, but Qin Wanru expected it. Her butterfly-like long eyelashes fluttered twice, covering a touch of deepness at the bottom of her eyes. Her father really doubted her medical skills. Why go to Yulan Pavilion? Shui Rulan asked confusedly. Madame D happens to be sick. She has invited a doctor before, but he has not cured her. Wanru will go to help. Is there really any disease? Qin Huayong said. So it was to let Madame D to test her medical skills. Yes, father. Qin Wanru nodded and said frankly. Shui Rulan was a little uneasy and reminded, General, this is not good. Sister may not want to see Wanru. It doesn't matter. I am beside her. She won't do anything. Qin Huayong shook his hand and said. Shui Rulan saw that this matter had been decided and Qin Wanru did not object. Thinking that with Qin Huayong's presence, Madame D would not dare to do anything even if she was full of malice to Qin Wanru, Shui Rulan was relieved. After exhorting Qin Wanru a few more words, she let Qin Wanru leave with Qin Huayong. As they walked slowly to Yulan Pavilion, Di Yan was also hurrying to Yulan Pavilion. At this moment, he had arrived at the gate of Yulan Pavilion. At the gate of Yulan Pavilion, two old maids were still guarding there. Seeing Di Yan coming, they hurried to salute. Di Yan strode inside, and the two old maids did not dare to stop him. Although the general locked Madame D, it also meant that if people from Duke Yong's mansion came, they would still be allowed to enter. In the main room, Madame D's face was black and purple. She panted heavily and looked at Huang Rui, who was kneeling in front of her. She was so angry that she kicked her and scolded, "You are such a cheap bitch. Do you really think that you are a good girl from a good family? You are just a cheap thing for people to buy and sell. You even want to enter our Duke Yong's mansion. You don't know whether you have the face or not." Nanny Zhou's words just now made her so angry that she almost couldn't help rushing out. Finally, she waited for Huang Rui, the bitch, to appear. Seeing her full face, Madame D was so angry that her lungs almost exploded. After asking her to kneel down, she slapped Huang Rui fiercely twice, which immediately made Huang Rui's delicate face swollen. At this moment, she pointed at Huang Rui and scolded loudly. In addition to her, there were Nanny Zhou and Hong Ye, who came to Qin's mansion with Huang Rui in the room. Hong Ye was also in a mess. Before Huang Rui came back, she had been slapped several times. At this moment, she was crying with red eyes. Huang Rui went out and only told her, but she did not know what Huang Rui did. She secretly hated that Huang Rui went out without discussing with her and finding a safe way. Huang Rui hooked up with Child D and got herself into trouble. Madame D looked like she would not spare her, so she did not want to take the blame for Huang Rui at this moment. Chapter 356. Because Hong Ye hated Huang Rui for implicating her without discussing with her, she immediately confessed all the words Huang Rui had said before, and never thought that she was Huang Rui's accomplice. Good, you bitch, I'll beat you to death." Madame D was so angry that she looked around, picked up a teacup on the table, and was about to smash it on Huang Rui's head. "Aunt, wait a minute." Di Yan, who had just reached the door, rushed in. When he saw the scene in front of him, he said anxiously. If the teacup was smashed, Huang Rui's face would be ruined, not to mention whether she would die or not. The fresh girl he just got couldn't be ruined like this. "Di Yan, how dare you come here? Do you know what you have done?" Seeing it was Di Yan, Madame D became more angry and scolded him harshly. "Aunt, don't be angry. She is just a servant girl. Can she really surpass Cousin Yu?" Di Yan stepped forward, took the cup from Madame D's hand, put it aside, and said to Madame D with a smile. "Di Yan, do you know what you are doing?" Seeing that his attitude was still so disrespectful, Madame D was so angry that her whole body trembled. This servant girl was not an ordinary servant girl. When she was sent here, her mother even warned her in private. The meaning of that was not simple. Later, she also asked Huang Rui. Huang Rui said that there were many servant girls like her, but she had never really served any master in Duke Yong's mansion. They were educated by separate etiquette instructors, and each of them was educated with excellent temperament and etiquette. Besides, they also learned some means of seducing men. Madame D heard from Nanny Zhou that these means were obviously some ways to confuse people, which were very similar to the ways of raising lean horses in brothels. Why did Duke Yong's mansion raise this group of women? What were they going to do in the future? Most of them were raised and educated since childhood. Madame D didn't dare to think about the meaning. "Aunt, she is just a servant girl. If you are angry, I will report it to my grandmother after returning to the mansion and ask her to send a few more," Di Yan said with a smile. He thought that Madame D felt embarrassed, so he added, "I'll ask my mother to apologize to you in person." Because Di Yan was the eldest son of the lineal descent, he had always been favored in Duke Yong's mansion. Not only his mother, but also Duke Yong's old madam was also obedient to him. In Di Yan's eyes, servant girls were really nothing. Previously, he had taken a fancy to a servant girl of old madam. Although old madam scolded him, she still sent the servant girl to his yard. You. Madame D was so angry that her breathing became rapid. She stood up and slapped Di Yan hard. "Madam." Nanny Zhou was shocked and hurried over to stop her. She slapped Di Yan's face. Di Yan was stunned. He covered his face with his hands and looked at Madame D in disbelief. He felt embarrassed and said, "Aunt, what do you mean? Don't tell me I can't even have a maid. Is this a maid you can accept?" Madame D was so angry that her face turned pale. The scar on her bone-thin face had not healed, which made her look more and more ferocious. Di Yan felt inexplicably disgusted, not only for Qin Yuru but also for Madame D. He straightened his neck and said angrily, "Why can't I accept a maid? Aunt, even my grandmother and my mother don't care about this kind of thing." There were other servants in this room. Especially before Huang Rui, he patted his chest and promised that there was nothing wrong. As long as he told Madame D would definitely let her go. The words they said when they were intimate were still ringing in his ears. Now he was slapped hard by Madame D, and even his face was smashed. Di Yan was ashamed and angry, looking at Madame D with a red face and neck. "This is the woman your grandmother sent to your uncle. Is she someone you can touch?" Madame D was really mad at Di Yan's unscrupulous behavior. She pointed at Di Yan and scolded, "It's okay that you don't learn good things in the past. I heard that your grandmother also worries about you in your own mansion. You don't even dare to have beautiful maids in your mansion. How dare you come to the Qin's mansion to snatch a woman from your uncle?" "What? My uncle's woman?" Di Yan was stunned by the scolding. He was still a little scared when Qin Huayong was mentioned. At this time, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. "This is the one your grandmother specially picked for your uncle. She wants to share the favor of the bitch over there. But you actually do such a thing, you." Madame D was so angry that she couldn't even speak. Nanny Zhou hurriedly helped her to sit on the chair and gently massaged her back. "Aunt, this maid is prepared for my uncle." I don't know." Di Yan was a little flustered at this time. If it was really prepared by Qin Huayong, he really did something wrong. Perhaps Qin Huayong would not let him go. Di Yan dared to be unreasonable with Madame D, but he didn't have the courage to be unreasonable with Qin Huayong. He had been trained by Qin Huayong for a period of time before. After that, he was very scared when he saw Qin Huayong. "You don't know. Why doesn't she know? When she entered the mansion, it was already agreed that she would be your uncle-in-law's concubine. But now, she actually took a fancy to you and actually had a relationship with you. How are you going to explain this to your uncle-in-law? Explain it to your grandmother." Madame D kicked Huang Rui fiercely and scolded her harshly. Huang Rui screamed in pain and sobbed with tears in her eyes, covering her legs. She looked delicate and aggrieved. If it was in the past, Di Yan would definitely go forward to comfort her. But at this time, he was not in the mood. He was very flustered and knew that something really happened. "Aunt, what should I do?" Di Yan didn't care about being angry at this time and asked hurriedly. "I don't know what to do." "You, who don't grow up, explain it yourself. Or let her seduce your uncle again. If your uncle can't find out that it has something to do with you, you can marry him." Seeing Di Yan's cowardly look, Madame D almost laughed out of anger. She sneered and spread out her hands. If she had known that this nephew was so useless, she would not have arranged this marriage at that time. Now Yuru had a good future. She could marry any family she wanted in the future. Why did she have to marry someone in her own mansion and marry such a coward? Let her uncle not know and deceive her. Her uncle once. Di Yan's eyes lit up. He immediately turned to Huang Rui on the ground and pulled her up. He reached out to pat the dust on her clothes. Under Huang Rui's affectionate eyes, he couldn't wait to say, "Huang Rui, you go to seduce my uncle once, get him drunk with wine, and then get together with him. In that way, my uncle will not remember clearly. At that time, you can also be my uncle's concubine, and my uncle will not blame me." Di Yan was really panicked. He just wanted to put the matter over. At this time, he couldn't see the beautiful face in his eyes. Huang Rui's face froze. She looked at Di Yan in front of her in astonishment, and her hands trembled slightly. She had just given her chastity to Di Yan. It sounded nice before. She thought he was the heir of Duke Yong's mansion and the grandson of old madam, and it was not a problem for him to have her. Unexpectedly, in such a short time, he wanted her to seduce the general in such a hasty way. "Aunt, do you have any good wine here? If not, I will ask someone to send it here now. You can ask her to dress up and seduce my uncle. It must be possible." As Di Yan said, he looked around the room for wine. The door was kicked open with a bang. Everyone in the room was shocked and looked at the door. When she saw Qin Huayong at the door clearly, Madame D screamed in a low voice, rolled her eyes, and fainted directly. Nanny Zhou was so scared that she hugged Madame D's soft body and whispered, Madam, wake up. You can't have an accident. You want to get me drunk and throw this on my bed?" Qin Huayong's blue veins bulged on his forehead. He strode close to Di Yan and said sternly. He was a general who fought on the battlefield. How could Di Yan, a son of an aristocratic family who had been pampered in the capital city for so long, compare with his momentum? At this time, he was so scared that he took 2 steps back. As Qin Huayong stepped forward step by step, he stepped back again and hurriedly explained, "Uncle, I really don't know. I don't know anything. It's that woman who seduced me." Di Yan reached out and pointed at Huang Rui, who fell to the ground powerlessly after being pushed by him again. "Yes, it's her. Uncle, I was fine in my own courtyard, but she came over and said some improper things. I was angry at that time, and when I saw her coming over. If I knew that she was the woman Uncle likes, I definitely wouldn't want her." Di Yan almost swore. At this time, he really hated Huang Rui very much. This woman had known his purpose of entering the Qin's mansion. Just now, she didn't say anything and just let him do whatever he wanted in the half-heartedly. Di Yan had a lot of women. Huang Rui's behavior just now showed that she was interested in Di Yan. Di Yan knew Huang Rui's identity but still slept with Di Yan. Obviously, Huang Rui deliberately framed Di Yan. Di Yan, who made his uncle a cuckold, felt that he was framed. Huang Rui was trembling all over. This time, she was not pretending but really trembling out of fear. She had never thought that Di Yan would be so irresponsible. Previously, he had said so sincerely and strongly in front of her, but now he was so weak. She even desperately knew that she was finished. She was in pain all over her body, but at this time, she was numb. She looked at Qin Huayong in despair and trembled, and stepped back on the ground. Qin Wanru stood at the door and looked at Huang Rui calmly. This woman looked extremely pitiful, but in fact, she did not need to be pitiful at all. In the last life, she treated her and her mother so viciously. This time, she attracted Qin Huayong to come here because she had calculated the scene in front of her. She wanted Qin Huayong to see Huang Rui and Duke Yong's mansion clearly. She stepped back and stood outside the room. She politely turned her back to the door, but she still paid attention to the movements inside. This time, she wanted to see how Duke Yong's mansion defended themselves. They sent such a servant girl to the Qin's mansion with bad intentions. Moreover, they did it when Shui Rulan was pregnant. Her father should be clear about the meaning. And now, she just needed to watch the show. She raised her watery eyes and looked at a corner of the sky in the distance. The sky was very empty, and only a few white clouds were floating in the blue sky. Chapter 357. In the room, Huang Rui was lying in a pool of blood with a pair of scissors in her throat. At this time, she was still breathing. She made a strange sound in her throat and rolled her eyes to look straight at Di Yan. The strange and terrible look scared Di Yan to sit down on the ground on the spot. As a playboy who was raised in a gentle and soft place, he had never seen such a dying scene. Qin Huaiyong strode around and walked to Huang Rui. Looking at the wound on her throat, he knew that the scissors were very fierce and she was hopeless. "Come on, ask Duke Yong to come here," Qin Huaiyong told the servant. The servant was smart and immediately came to his senses. He turned around and ran out in a panic. Qin Wanru stood in the corridor and looked at the direction of the room. After thinking for a while, she finally walked over. When she arrived at the door of the room, she saw Huang Rui lying on the ground in the room. Her eyes were slightly agitated, but she was not as scared as Di Yan, whose legs were soft. "Wanru, you go back first. Don't tell your mother and grandmother what happened here. I will deal with it." At this time, Qin Huaiyong had calmed down and looked at Qin Wanru and whispered, "Yes, father." Qin Wanru nodded, bowed and left. When she reached the door, she looked up at the room and found that Madame D was still unconscious. Nanny Zhou didn't dare to call her loudly and patted her back carefully. Seeing that Madame D's mouth was trembling, Nanny Zhou should have woken up. Since such a thing happened here, and Duke Yong would come soon, she couldn't pretend to be unconscious even if she wanted to. As for Di Yan, her watery eyes glanced at Di Yan, whose face was pale, with a trace of sarcasm in the bottom of her eyes. She took Yujie out of the courtyard and walked out in the direction of the outer court casually, looking thoughtful. "Miss, why don't you tell Madame Shui and Madame Dowager about this?" Yujie saw that Qin Wanru did not go inside but went outside, knowing that she was not going to tell Madame Shui and Madame Dowager. "My father naturally has a judgment. If I tell this kind of thing, my mother and grandmother will be worried." Qin Wanru shook her head. She had the same idea as Qin Huaiyong. She did not want to tell Shui Rulan about this bad thing. Huang Rui died in the mansion, which was an extremely inauspicious thing. Shui Rulan was pregnant, so she had better stay away from this kind of thing. Moreover, even if she wanted to intervene, she could not. This thing also involved of Duke Yong's mansion, so it was even more inappropriate for Shui Rulan to of it. It was better for her not to know anything. As for her grandmother, she was old, so Qin Wanru didn't want her to worry too much. This matter was beyond her grandmother's ability to solve. Qin Wanru keenly felt that this was not just a matter of the backyard. After today's matter broke out, Huang Rui would inevitably bear the greatest responsibility. Di Yan would inevitably push all the blame to her. Heavy punishment was inevitable, but she might not necessarily die. However, she did not hesitate to choose this road of death. Of course, it was not because she was unyielding, but because she had no choice but to die. Why did she have to die? Thinking of her temperament of a good family and the way she behaved, Di Yan had never seen her. She was not raised in Duke Yong's mansion, but she was trained by Duke Yong's mansion. It seemed that she had been trained for a long time, and she even thought that she would die if she failed. Such a way of controlling her didn't seem to belong to a common prostitute. The meaning of this could only be understood when one pondered deeply. 1, 2, it was as if something was being pulled apart. Just a corner was enough to make one tremble in fear. After that, didn't you tell Madame Shui and Madame Dowager? Yujie felt that she couldn't hide it from Madame Shui and Madame Lao. Even if she could hide it for a while, she couldn't hide it for long. Father will explain it to mother and grandmother himself. On this point, Qin Wanru didn't think there was any doubt. Qin Huaiyong just said so for the sake of expediency. Shui Rulan was in charge of the backyard of Qin's mansion, so she would always inquire about it. When she went out just now, she saw two rough old maids guarding the courtyard door trembling with pale faces, which meant that they should have also heard the screams inside and guessed that something had happened inside. A servant on the door hurriedly ran in. After seeing Qin Wanru, he was stunned for a moment, and suddenly wiped his sweat, saluted and said, "Second miss. What's the matter?" Qin Wanru looked at this road. This was already the inside of Chuehua Gate, and the servant on the door was not allowed to come in if there was nothing important. "I'm looking for the general." The servant said. What's the matter? Qin Wanru asked indifferently. Duke Xing's mansion sent someone here, saying that they have something to discuss with the general. They said that it was very important and urgent. The servant reported. He entered the inner courtyard to find the general. He heard from the servants that the general entered the inner courtyard and might go to Madame Shui's place. He was planning to go to Madame Shui's place along the main road of the backyard. Where is he? Qin Wanru asked calmly. He's in the flower hall outside. The servant was stunned for a moment, but immediately reacted and hurriedly replied. He did not expect that the second miss did not say where the general went, but asked where the people of Duke Xing's mansion went. Father has something to do. Take me there. Qin Wanru said lightly. Yes, second miss, please follow me. Seeing that Qin Wanru agreed, the servant did not dare to disobey and hurriedly led the way. Along the way, they went to a flower hall in the outer courtyard. When they arrived at the door of the flower hall, Qin Wanru waved her hand, and the servant retreated to the door. Qin Wanru walked slowly into the flower hall with Yujie. Seeing that it was Nanny Sheng who served Madame of Duke Xing sitting inside, she slightly smiled. As expected, Madame of Duke Xing could not wait any longer. She knew that she must have sent someone here today. Hearing the sound at the door, Nanny Sheng hurriedly looked up. When she saw that the person coming was not Qin Huayong but Qin Wanru, she could not help but be stunned. He blinked his eyes and asked hesitantly, Second Miss Qin. Nanny Sheng, what's the matter? Father has something important to deal with at this time. Qin Wanru came forward with a smile and said. Huang Rui was dead, and the people of Duke Yong's mansion would immediately come to solve this matter. Of course, this matter was much more important than Nanny Sheng's matter. Even if this reason was put in front of Qin Huayong, it could also be explained. Second miss. Nanny Sheng stammered and looked a little embarrassed. She did not expect that it was Qin Wanru who came out instead of General Qin. Nanny Sheng, please sit down. Qin Wanru sat down on the chair first, reached out and said politely. Nanny Sheng smiled and no longer refused. After sitting down on the chair, she looked at Qin Wanru carefully. She looked leisurely and behaved decently. Her beautiful eyes were as clear as water, but there seemed to be mist when her watery eyes moved. Even if it was only a pair of eyes, it had already made people feel that their eyes were bright. She pinched and loosened her fingers in her sleeves. She did not expect that this person was Qin Wanru, and all the previous words were directed at Qin Huayong. For a moment, the clever Nanny Sheng felt that she did not know where to start. The room became strangely quiet. It was Qin Wanru who broke this strange peace. She smiled slightly and said, Nanny Sheng, why do you want to see my father? Do you need me to convey it to him? It's not an important thing. Nanny, you came here before, and then she knew that second miss turned out to be the savior of our mansion's old madam. Our madam wants to ask General Qin what he needs. Our mansion wants to send a big gift to second Miss Qin to thank second miss for saving our old madam. Nanny Sheng coughed twice and said slowly. What she said was half true and half false. In the end, Nanny Sheng also felt that this was a feasible reason, so she said with a smile at the moment. You want to send me a big gift? It's really not necessary. A doctor has the heart of a parent. It's not a big deal. Qin Wanru politely refused, with a sense of sarcasm rising in her heart. She had to ask what he needed before giving a gift. They were not familiar with each other, and what she said was extremely untrustworthy. It was just a good reason, and no one would take it seriously. How can this be? Our old madam is the most distinguished person in our mansion. Second miss saved our old madam, which is a great kindness to our whole mansion. Our madam not only wants to send second miss a big gift, but also wants to invite second miss to live in our mansion for a few days, so that our madam can show her sincerity. Nanny Sheng said with a flattering smile. She got rid of the surprise and embarrassment of their first meeting. She wants me to go to Duke Xing's mansion. When I go to Duke Xing's mansion, I will be surrounded by Madame of Duke Xing's servants. At that time, I really can't ask for help. Qin Wanru had expected that Madame of Duke Xing would be so calculating, so her smile became more and more gentle. It's not necessary. Recently something happened in the mansion, and my father will not let us leave. Something happened? What's the matter? Do you need our madam's help? Nanny Xing said with concern. This is really not necessary. Qin Wanru shook her head. Second Miss not only saved Master Hao, but also saved our old madam. What's the problem? As long as our madam can do it, she will try her best. Second Miss, please don't regard me as an outsider. Nanny Xing inquired. I am afraid that my father does not want others to help him. Nanny Xing, please go back. Qin Wanru looked at the sky outside and said meaningfully. Second Miss, this is the kindness of our madam and old madam. Nanny Xing didn't expect that she would be driven away before she could even see Qin Huayong. She said unwillingly. Let's talk about this later. Thank your madam and old madam for us. There are many things in the mansion recently, so it is really inconvenient for me to go to Duke Xing's mansion. Qin Wanru smiled more sincerely. Nanny Xing became more and more anxious. Then when will the things be finished? She didn't want to leave without a definite message. Seeing that Qin Wanru was sending her away, she pretended not to understand and continued to ask. The earliest will be after the first lunar month. During the spring festival, we must spend the new year in the mansion. Qin Wanru said implicitly. It had been a custom for many years to spend the days in one's mansion on the 15th day of the first lunar month. Even if something really happened and lived in another mansion, it would be after the 15th day of the first lunar month or today. After all, today was not the 15th day of the first lunar month. After the 15th day of the first lunar month, I will come again. Second Miss, please convey our madam's message. Nanny Xing had to stand up and said. Okay. Qin Wanru picked up the teacup at hand with a smile. After drinking it up, she looked at the teacup in front of Nanny Xing. It was obvious that she wanted to see the guest off. Nanny Xing could only say goodbye. Seeing Nanny Xing leave, Qin Wanru's eyes showed a trace of coldness with a trace of malice. Since something happened in her mansion, Duke Xing's mansion would not ask her and Qin Yuru to leave no matter what reason they used. Chapter 358. Duke Yong and Countess Yong came here in a hurry. After getting off the carriage, they walked inside. After a few steps, they suddenly saw a person rushing out from the roadside and directly bumping into Countess Yong. How dare you? Duke Yong, who was upset, stood still and scolded harshly. Countess Yong, I'm the servant of Madame of Duke Xing. Unexpectedly, the person calmly bowed to them and said to Countess Yong. Countess Yong looked over and immediately recognized that it was Nanny Xing who served Madame of Duke Xing. She was stunned at once. Nanny Xing, why are you here? Is Madame of Duke Xing also here? I'll go first. Come here soon. Duke Yong said impatiently. He was full of annoyance now. Hearing that something had happened to his son, he was not in the mood to stay and talk. After glancing at Nanny Xing, he turned and strode away. Nanny Xing, what's going on? Countess Yong was also very annoyed. Looking around and seeing that there was no one, she leaned to the side path and asked. Madam, did something happen? Nanny Xing couldn't help but ask in surprise when she saw that both of them looked frightened. She originally thought that Qin Wanru made an excuse. After leaving the flower hall, she didn't leave Qin's mansion directly. Instead, she hid aside and wanted to see what was going on. She really didn't believe that it was such a coincidence that something so important happened in Qin's mansion that Ning Yuan Army General didn't even have time to see her. She heard that when Nanny Yu came here before, Ning Yuan Army General still met her in person and didn't say that there was anything important to deal with. Nanny Sheng didn't expect that it was Duke Yong and his wife who came instead of Ning Yuan army general. Looking at their serious faces, Nanny Sheng's heart skipped a beat. Could it be such a coincidence that something really happened in Qin's mansion? Nothing. Why are you here? Your madam is also here. Countess Yong didn't want to talk about her family affairs. It didn't sound like a good thing. Until now, she didn't know what had happened. She only said that her son had an affair with a servant girl in Qin's mansion, and the servant girl died. Our madam is not here. Madam asked me to come here. She wants the first Miss Qin and the second Miss Qin to live in our mansion for a period of time. Our old madam likes the two misses of the Qin's mansion very much. Our madam also gets along well with the first Mississippi. She may accept the first miss as her adopted daughter after a period of time. Nanny Sheng said with a smile, as if she did not see the impatience in Countess Yong's eyes. Your old madam likes Yuru and her younger sister, and your madam wants to adopt Yuru as her daughter. Countess Yong was overjoyed. Although she did not understand why there was another Qin Wanru, she thought that Qin Wanru might have said so to deceive others. She was so excited that Madame D's plan was really good. Qin Yuru won the favor of old Madam and Madam of Duke Xing, which was a good thing for the whole Duke Yong's mansion. It was equivalent to finding the background of Duke Xing for Duke Yong's mansion, which was a great thing for Duke Yong's mansion, which was declining day by day. Madame D had written a letter to Countess Yong about her previous plan. Of course, Madame D didn't tell her in detail about some small details, which were things that Madame of Duke Xing asked her to keep secret, and warned her that if she made a mistake, Qin Yuru would never have a chance to enter Duke Xing's mansion again. Madame D was afraid of making Madame of Duke Xing angry, so she would not talk about the details with Countess Yong. She only said that if Qin Yuru was a little younger and showed her dislike of Qin Yuru, Madame of Duke Xing would like Qin Yuru and take pity on her. At first, Countess Yong felt that this was really strange, but later she found that Madame D's words were reasonable, and she promised that this would definitely work. She also said that this could prevent Qin Yuru from being hurt by rumors, so Countess Yong believed in Madame of Duke Xing for the time being and cooperated with Madame D. Unexpectedly, Madame of Duke Xing really liked Qin Yuru. This was the first time that Countess Yong heard the intention of Duke Xing's mansion clearly. How could Countess Yong not be excited? Yes, this is what our madam means. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. Our madam wants first miss to be more liked by old madam, so she specially sent me here to discuss with Ning Yuan army general to take both misses to Duke Xing's mansion to stay for a few days and accompany old madam more. After the new year, they can choose a suitable time to recognize each other. Coincidentally, they can also visit relatives during the new year. Nanny Sheng was a clever person around Madame of Duke Xing. Seeing Countess Yong's smiling face, she knew that she was happy, so her words sounded better and better. Countess Yong nodded repeatedly and said, "This is true." Then when did they decide to go? I didn't see Ning Yuan army general. Nanny Sheng said with a bitter face. Why didn't you see him? What happened? Countess Yong was happy when she suddenly heard that Nanny Sheng didn't even see Ning Yuan army general. She couldn't help being furious. Speaking of this, I don't know what happened. I didn't see Ning Yuan army general, only second miss of Qin's mansion. Second miss said that Ning Yuan army general had something important to do at this time and had no time to see me. I had no choice but to go back and report it to my husband. You see, it's such a good thing. If we miss the New Year's Eve, old madam may forget it. This kind of thing has to be done while old madam is happy, and then we can strike while the iron is hot so that we can settle it. Nanny Sheng spread out her hands and said to Countess Yong helplessly. You go back first. At this time, Ning Yuan army general does have something important to do. After a while, I will talk to Ning Yuan army general about this. I believe he will be happy. Countess Yong's face also darkened. After a pause, she pressed her lips with a handkerchief and coughed in a low voice. Thank you, madam. Nanny Sheng was overjoyed and thanked Countess Yong. Countess Yong nodded and said, you go back first. I also have something to do at this time, so I have to go. Countess Yong nodded and said with a smile, Madam, please. Countess Yong didn't say anything more. She just nodded to Nanny Sheng and hurried to the inner courtyard with her servants. Nanny Sheng smiled and watched Countess Yong leave. When she couldn't see Countess Yong's figure, she frowned and hid the smile on her face. Did something really happen? How could it be so coincidental? She looked at Countess Yong's back for a long time and found nothing, so she turned and left helplessly. This time, she really left Ningyuan Army General's mansion. She was going to report to Madam that something really happened in Qin's mansion. Not only did Ningyuan Army General have no time to see her, but even Duke Yong and Countess Yong also hurried over. After the carriage, Nanny Sheng was still thinking about what had happened just now. How could it be so coincidental? Why did something happen when Madam decided to bring second Miss Qin to the mansion? During the spring festival, the mansion was in chaos. Second Miss Qin was not a relative of the mansion. If something happened, it seemed that Madam couldn't blame her. How could such a good opportunity be wasted in vain? Nanny Sheng returned to Duke Xing's mansion with a complicated mind. Not to mention how Nanny Sheng reported to Madam of Duke Xing, when Duke Yong entered Yulan Pavilion, he saw the dead servant girl on the ground as soon as he entered. Being stared at by her lifeless eyes, Duke Yong was so scared that he took 2 steps back and almost fell. He reached out to hold the wall, calmed down, and looked at Qin Huayong sitting in the main seat with a very bad look. Madame D, who was beside Qin Huayong, was in Nanny Zhou's arms and was still wiping her tears with a handkerchief. Hearing the sound of Duke Yong coming in, she raised her head and her eyes were red from crying. On the other side, Di Yan was also sitting, with his head lowered dispiritedly, like a frosted eggplant. After calming down, Duke Yong strode forward and asked, What the hell is going on? Brother-in-law, please sit down and talk. Qin Huayong reached out his hand and gestured. Duke Yong sat down in the chair opposite him. Brother-in-law, do you know this servant girl? Qin Huayong looked at the dead servant girl on the ground with a sullen face and said. Who is she? I don't know her. Duke Yong looked carefully and didn't recognize who it was, so he shook his head in confusion. This is the servant girl sent by my mother-in-law. She said that she will serve me and specially sent here to distract Madame Shui. I don't know what she means. Madame Shui is pregnant now. If something goes wrong, something will definitely happen. Qin Huayong didn't beat around the bush with Duke Yong and said with a sneer. Brother-in-law, I don't know how I offended my mother-in-law and made her treat me like this. Madame Shui may be my only child in her belly. Besides, Madame Shui is my legal wife, which is also recognized by your mansion. Why did you specially send such a girl here? Qin Huayong didn't stand on ceremony at this moment. He slammed his hand on the table, and the fierce momentum of a military general immediately made Duke Yong a little more uncomfortable. Brother-in-law, what the hell is going on? I still don't understand it. Does it have something to do with my mother? She is so old. My sister's current status is also related to her. Does she want to use other women to fight for your favor? She is so knowledgeable. Duke Yong sighed helplessly and pointed at the servant girl with a disapproving look on his face. Then you killed this servant girl? Even if you don't like her, you don't need to kill her. We don't know whether the servant girl sent by my mother has signed a death contract with you. If not, it will be troublesome. Duke Yong reacted quickly and immediately thought of the place where he could find fault with Qin Huayong, so he said half-truthfully. If this matter became serious, Duke Yong's mansion must be in the wrong. Even the Yu family shouldn't do this kind of thing. Brother-in-law, the servant girl's death has nothing to do with me, but with Child. If you don't believe me, you can ask Child directly. Qin Huayong leaned back and didn't explain, but pointed at Di Yan beside him. Di Yan also raised his head at this moment, and his face was full of panic and fear. Father, tell me, what the hell is going on? Duke Yong's face darkened, and he glared at his son and asked. Father, this servant girl seduced me. I didn't know she was prepared by grandma for uncle-in-law. I don't know anything. I wanted to return her to uncle-in-law. She committed suicide. She committed suicide, and it has nothing to do with me. Because of anxiety and panic, Di Yan didn't speak in order. He looked sad and dared not look at Huang Rui. Chapter 359. This servant girl, who was so soft and fragrant before, died in a short while. Di Yan still couldn't believe it until now, and he was in a state of tension. He spoke incoherently, but even so, Duke Yong still understood him. He looked stern and almost came over to slap Di Yan in the face out of anger. First brother-in-law, please tell me what you mean. Qin Huayong ignored the useless Di Yan, looked at Duke Yong aggressively, and said word by word. It could be seen that he was really angry. Duke Yong didn't expect that there would be such a thing. For a moment, he was so angry and hateful that he couldn't even say a word. Brother-in-law, we really don't know about it. We have to go back and ask old madam to know what she means. Old madam is old, and it's inevitable that she will do some stupid things. Please forgive her. Countess Yong came in. Although her face was pale and ugly, she still forced herself to cheer up and said with a flattering smile. In fact, she had arrived just now. She listened outside the door for a while and knew that Duke Yong couldn't answer this question. So, she had to stand up and put the blame on old madam of Duke Yong. Old madam was an elder, and she was old, but she still cared about her daughter. Even if she did something wrong, it was pardonable. As her son-in-law, Qin Huayong couldn't really come to her door to question her. Yes, it's my mother. It's my mother who said that she would send someone here. She said that I have been living a hard life recently, so my mother couldn't bear it and chose such a person to come here. In fact, I don't want to listen to my mother's words very much, but my mother has sent someone here. What can I do? And until now, I haven't asked her to seduce you. But who would expect that? This girl is so careless that she actually turned to Di Yan. Madame Di burst into tears. With Countess Yong's words, she also put the blame on old madam and showed her innocence. It was not that she didn't hook up with Qin Huayong, but she didn't find a chance. For this reason, Madame Di scolded Huang Rui severely. But now she could use it as an excuse to defend herself. Qin Huayong was gone, and there was no place to prove it. Uncle-in-law, it was really her who seduced me. I was in my own yard, and this maid dressed up to look for me. I was bewitched by her at that time, and I didn't know that she was prepared by grandma for uncle-in-law. Di Yan finally came to his senses and defended himself loudly. So, this is all old madam's idea, and it has nothing to do with you. Qin Huayong's eyes were cold. His gaze swept across the faces of everyone present. Everyone nodded. That's it. Your Duke Yong's mansion should at least give me an explanation, right? Qin Huayong's face was cold, and he had no intention of compromising. But this is old madam's idea. Countess Yong also panicked a little. Do you mean that you want me to sue old madam? Qin Huayong pointed at the maid lying on the ground and said, in this case, I will ask someone to come and check it later. After saying that, he stood up and was about to leave, which meant that he was going to take action. Although he could not directly make things difficult for old madam, he could let the people in the Yamen question old madam through this murder case. If the people in the Yamen really found old madam of Duke Yong's mansion, the whole Duke Yong's mansion would lose its face. Moreover, Di Yan was involved in this case. If this matter was really spread out, Di Yan would be accused of going against human relations and forcing himself to rape a maid. Even if Di Yan was the heir of Duke Yong, he might not be able to bear this matter. Moreover, Duke Yong did not dare to ask someone to investigate this matter. The more this matter was investigated, the more panicked it would be. Duke Yong reached out to hold Qin Huayong and said with a serious face, brother-in-law, don't worry. We will definitely give you an explanation for this matter. But it's better not to make it big. Mother is not young. If it is really big, how will she live? How will others think of her? If she is not good, it will always affect you. You have just arrived in the capital city not long ago. Duke Yong used both carrot and stick in his words. What he meant was that Qin Huayong had just arrived in the capital city and had not gained a firm foothold yet. As expected, Qin Huayong was silent. Duke Yong was overjoyed, but he deliberately put on a sad look. Brother-in-law, you don't want her to have an accident, do you? Moreover, this matter is always about a maid. It should be a maid who has bought a death contract. If she dies, she dies. Will you make our mansions estranged because of this matter? Even if you don't do it for my sister's sake, you have to do it for Yuru's sake. At this time, the marriage between Qin Yuru and Di Yan was also used as a bargaining chip. Qin Huayong did not say anything. He looked at Di Yan with a gloomy face and asked coldly, "You don't like Yuru, do you?" Di Yan hurriedly waved his hands. "Uncle-in-law, Yuru and I are childhood sweethearts. How can I not like her? Uncle-in-law, don't worry. I will treat Yuru well in the future. This kind of thing will never happen again." At this time, he did not dare to say anything bad about Qin Yuru. Although he wanted to strangle Qin Yuru when he thought about it, he did not dare to show it on his face. The thing about Huang Rui must be told by Qin Yuru to his aunt. The servant saw that someone dropped the handkerchief. It must be Qin Yuru's maid. After knowing this, she did not come to make trouble with him, but pushed the matter to his aunt. As long as he thought that these troubles were caused by Qin Yuru, Di Yan was so angry that his heart trembled. But this was obviously not the time for revenge. He had to swallow this anger. "I don't want to see Madame Di again." Qin Huayong turned his eyes to Duke Yong again. Duke Yong's face changed dramatically. "What do you mean?" "I don't mean anything. I just want to tell you that people of your mansion should not come to visit in the future. Madame Di was good at first. Since she came to the capital city, she seems to be a different person." Qin Huayong said coldly. He glanced at Madame Di, who was sitting on the side with a nervous look. Seeing that she wanted to speak, he snorted coldly. Madame Di hurriedly bowed her head in fear. After what happened today, she now felt more and more weak in front of Qin Huayong. Even if her elder brother and sister-in-law were present, she could not be arrogant. Huang Rui had not been beaten up, which reminded her that the matter in front of her had not been dealt with. It happened so suddenly, and Qin Huayong heard the conversation between her and Di Yan, which almost made her have no possibility to make a comeback. She gritted her teeth and glared at Di Yan with hatred. She was annoyed and sullen. She clenched her hands hard and tried to calm down the anger in her heart. Did she still have a chance? She definitely had a chance. She still had a daughter. As long as her daughter made a comeback, she would definitely have a chance to make Qin Huayong give in. After being Qin Huayong's wife for so many years, how could she not know what Qin Huayong cared about? Since it was not the time to despair, she still had a chance. "Brother-in-law, I promise you that I won't ask my mother to send people to visit my sister these days, but there will be occasional visits. Besides, our mansions are now in-laws, and I can't always not see my sister in front of people." Although Duke Yong gave in, he still wanted to fight for some chances for Madame Di. "If so, it's better to report it to the government," Qin Huayong said unceremoniously. His words were sharp and almost showed no respect to Duke Yong. But at this moment, Duke Yong had to give in. Not only his mother, but also his son was involved. "Okay, brother-in-law, well, let's do it," Duke Yong said sullenly. "Send Madame Di to recuperate, not in the mansion." Qin Huayong did not intend to end this matter and said coldly. "General, what do you want to do?" Madame Di couldn't bear it anymore and screamed. Duke Yong's face also turned cold. "Brother-in-law, my sister can't go out of the city to recuperate. How will others think of my sister and our mansion? Sending Madam out of the mansion meant that this matter would be spread widely. Duke Yong didn't want others to know this matter, so he looked a little more uncompromising. It was not only because he couldn't afford to lose face, but also because he was afraid that it would cause other troubles. Duke Yong's mansion couldn't be investigated by others. Seeing Duke Yong like this, Qin Huaiyong also knew that this had touched his bottom line. This was also an important reason why he didn't propose to Duke Yong's mansion before. But now, he was determined to do this. Just use the reason that she didn't treat Yuru and Wanru well. Qin Huaiyong said coldly and decisively. What do you mean? My sister treated Yuru badly? Duke Yong simply thought that Qin Huaiyong was crazy and said such words. Qin Wanru was not his sister's daughter, so she could do whatever she wanted. It didn't matter if his sister had some extreme behaviors. But Qin Yuru was Madame D's daughter, how could she treat her badly? Madame D's body shook, and she subconsciously looked at Qin Huaiyong with her eyes flickering. Di Yan looked at Madame D and then looked at Qin Huaiyong. He was also confused. Didn't Aunt like cousin sister? Why didn't he think so? Didn't Aunt give everything to cousin sister Yuru first? Although Countess Yong was also stunned by Qin Huaiyong's words, her eyes showed contemplation. Did it mean what Nanny Xing said before? She knows best whether she treated her badly or not. Of course, tell others that she was seriously ill and found a yard outside the city to rest quietly, Qin Huaiyong said coldly, his eyes calm and stern. Madame D looked absent-minded, and her eyes looked a little dull, but she didn't object. It's just a rest, and it's not a big deal. If someone asks again, just say that she treated her two daughters badly. Qin Huaiyong's voice calmed down, but his face was still cold and stern. How can you? Duke Yong still wanted to say something, but was interrupted by Madame D, who was beside him. Brother, that's it. I will go outside the city to rest quietly. Sister, you have to think it through. This retreat is different from other retreats, right? Duke Yong was afraid that Madame D didn't understand the seriousness of it, so he said hurriedly. Madame D shook her head and said bitterly, Brother, I know. They will keep me under guard and prevent others from contacting me, but it's better than implicating Mother. She meant that she would take the responsibility for Huang Rui alone. Duke Yong's mansion suffered a loss in this matter, so she had to make a concession. Madame D willingly expressed that she was willing to take the responsibility for this concession. Of course, she would not be reconciled, but now she could only do this. Fortunately, although time was tight, she still had a chance. Sister. Duke Yong's eyes turned red. They had always had a good relationship with each other. At this time, he was more and more moved, but he also knew that this was the best. Duke Yong and his wife came and left in a hurry. Huang Rui was carried out at night, thrown into the mass grave at will, and buried. After that, Madame D's things had been packed, and it was said that she would be sent out to rest after the New Year's Eve tomorrow night. When Qin Wanru got the news, she hadn't slept yet. She was cutting window flowers under the lamp and preparing to paste them on her window tomorrow. With her long hair hanging down casually, she looked more immature. Nanny Xing didn't sleep either, and was talking with her about the women's school in the capital city. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.